Welcome to the world of the paranormal. For centuries, self-proclaimed psychics have captivated audiences with promises of supernatural insights and cosmic connections, tapping into another world, or even claiming to harness some unseen energy force. They've packed arenas, raked in millions, and claimed that they bring comfort to the desperate and the grieving. But is there actually something supernatural going on? Are these prophetic prodigies really tapping into some ethereal plane of existence? Or is it all just an elaborate hustle, perfected by generations of grifters? Sure, we've all heard stories about your aunt's friend's cousin who totally predicted that earthquake in California, that medium who knew things that they couldn't possibly have known. But when put to the test under controlled conditions, do any of their claims actually hold up? And if it's all just smoke and mirrors, what's the harm? If someone finds comfort believing that their dead relatives are watching over them, isn't that worth the price of admission? But what if that price is more than just a ticket to a show? What happens when vulnerable people bet their life savings on a divine investment tip? Or when a grieving parent forgoes medical treatment for their child because a psychic energy healer assured them that the cancer had just disappeared? Over the next several episodes, we'll be diving deep into the twisted world of psychic phenomena. We'll explore the tricks of the trade, expose the scams, follow the money, and shine a light on the dark underbelly of an industry built on exploiting human suffering. From the classic cold reading techniques pioneered by fraudulent mediums to the high-tech methods used by modern mentalists. From small-time carnival fortune tellers to multi-millionaire TV psychics pushing prophecy for profit. Join me as we separate fact from fiction and reveal exactly how the biggest names in the psychic business have been pulling off one of the world's oldest cons. What's that? I see some exposed frauds in your future. Let's shatter some crystal balls together, shall we?
They descend like vultures. Never in the history of the world has a psychic solved a missing child case. Never.
Psychic shows like the Long Island Medium possess an editing room advantage in which they can take all of their misses over a several hour-long recording, show only the hits, and wow their audience. But what happens when they go outside this comfort zone, appearing on other people's shows, particularly live shows? Well, our brains are still wired towards confirmation bias, where we focus on the hits and ignore the misses. That is, until we start to look for the misses, for the psychic cringe fails. But this can get tedious, so to save you time, I've put together a compilation of just that. This is part 1. Enjoy.
Who lost the spouse? I think I'm right here. Your wife has departed? Is that her wedding ring?
No, it's my mother's.
Do you still have her chair?
No.
Or did she have an issue with her legs prior to her passing?
No.
Was there an issue with the legs where your husband was bed restriction? Is that correct?
So you'll always know when you talk to a family member, when you start a case, you'll know if this person is dead or alive. Every time.
Yes.
Does this girl look familiar to you?
Yeah, she does. I worked this case.
This is a girl who you said was beaten and killed.
Okay.
This little girl is me. And you told somebody that she's dead.
Wait a minute. You didn't disappear?
I'm right here.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
All told, 10 different psychics told our producer that Lisa had been murdered. And the FBI says to Inside Edition that they are not aware of any criminal investigation that has been solved as a direct result of information provided by a psychic.
We do see massive energy grid blackouts and cyber attacks by May or June. One feels like it's in the Northeast, East Coast, New York area or Washington area. We think Hillary Clinton will be elected president.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
I'm starting with a gentleman, first off, and with this man, who? Reg. And he's also mentioned Frank. Thank you. Okay, what's that uniform? In his younger years, I can see the uniform. In his younger years, please, I don't know what he was in the Air Force. I don't feel he was a pilot because of his attire, but he's keen to show me that. And he's transported back into the older age in which he passed. He may not even be family, he may be just known to you.
Frank or Reg? Anyone?
Okay. Yes, please, could you, microphone, bless. What say?
Good afternoon. My father, his name was Hugh, and he was in the Air Force. And he didn't fly, he was a civil engineer.
That'll do.
Glynis. Do Do you know Glennis or Glennis? Living, physical?
No, it doesn't ring any bells.
It doesn't.
Earlier, I invited 3 mediums to a one-time Victorian chocolate factory, where they all channeled the name George, an evil fat man who was the factory's first manager.
She's given me the name of George.
George. The only trouble is that George is part of a made-up story that I planted on the chocolate factory website a week ago. Astonishingly, Goldie has actually summoned the ghost of my made-up factory manager.
So what's his name?
I've got George and I've got Bull.
We chose the surname Bull for a reason.
Have you ever noticed how many psychic storefronts there are in Manhattan? I wondered what would happen if I got my palms read at all of them. Do you think they would say the same exact thing? How long will I live?
Into your late 80s.
Late 90s.
Into your 80s, in your 90s. It shows beyond your 80s. She was born to live into your 98. 90, 91,
91.
I don't know who put this lovely picture in here. Oh, you're upstairs. Is this something called the barn? Is his name Bernard or Barnard? No. Why would he say that? That's our nan. Oh, your nan? Sorry.
All the things that you channeled today, like, George Bull, that all came from a story that I made up. Does that mean that you cheated?
I did. I don't think it was ever a chocolate factory.
That's the one thing it was, Goldie, I'm afraid. Yeah, you see, you've even got the truth wrong.
Yeah, I know.
We dropped our psychics in the middle of a massive pine forest. There's a rescue chopper waiting for them. Our psychics have just 15 minutes to find the chopper. They've got a map that shows an outline of the area and then something belonging to the pilot. So a personal effect, keys, wallets, something like that. And then our psychics will use that to sense, the right direction.
How did they do? Let's have a look. Most of them veer off to the right and get lost, rather than making a fairly straight path to the helicopter. These aren't just any psychics, they are the top 10 in Australia.
From hundreds of applicants, we've narrowed the field to the top 10 psychics Australia has to offer.
I can see her. Oh no. It's a car. Terrible. Back to start.
Will I be married?
I see marriage for the next 2 years. You'll be married in your late 30s.
The 10 years about.
I would say maybe no later than 2 years.
At least 3 years. Major commitment's about a year and a half away. Maybe a child, but not marriage. You're not the marrying kind.
Almost 9 years ago, Amanda Berry's mom went on the Montel Williams show, where resident psychic Sylvia Brown spoke of Amanda.
Don't think I'll ever see her again. Yeah, in heaven. She's gone, honey.
Then who's this?
Hello, Liz. Help me, I'm Amanda Berry. I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now.
There are 2 jagged boulders which look really misplaced.
He could be found near
He's near the boulders.
Is he still with us? Sean was found alive, not stuck between jagged boulders, but in an apartment in suburban St. Louis.
Is it possible for a psychic to read the history of an instrument just by touching? Please welcome Nella Jones.
That's just a little thing. That's just getting into a lock of some sort. I felt class with that one. This one, God knows why. I'm picking up a heavy tyre, so I don't know what that's being used for. Sorry, my darling, best I can do.
You examined 6 objects, you got no information from 3 of them, and you got incorrect information from the remaining 3.
All right. He's going to be the father of 2 children. He's going to be a father of 3 kids, 2 boys.
I see 2 boys and a girl.
Your dad showed 2 children in the future.
I'll adopt 2 kids.
Was somebody murdered? Like, murdered?
No.
I feel like somebody passed from a suicide where their actions brought about how they got there. If anybody over there has somebody who crossed over like that, that's kind of how they showed it to me.
No, we're seeing lots of...
It's connected to Michael, if it helps.
I had an aunt. Her name
Say it
was
again?
Moira.
Okay, I'm getting someone now whose name is...
Kenny!
Kenny says hi.
She'll be given the 12 biographies. Then she'll do a tarot card reading on each subject. To win, she has to match the person to the correct bio 9 out of 12 times.
How convinced are you that you're going to win $1 million?
I'm convinced. I see that you're a person that's ambitious. I'm going to go with this one.
And this is your final answer?
Yes.
If this is your bio, I want you to turn it towards the camera. If it's not your bio, I want you to crumple it up. Now, it looks like you've got one right.
I still believe I'm psychic.
What do you make of that?
It's called, what's the term? Stubborn.
I guarantee you one headline you will never see is this one: Psychic wins lottery again.
Oh, psychics. Most people aren't that impressed when one of them spits out a mundane vagary like,
Was your husband ill prior to his passing?
I was amazed. Amazed. Remarkable.
I said most people, but when a psychic gets a hit like,
Are you adopted?
Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. 795.000 euro.
I know that she took her own life.
that's something else entirely. For the first type of prediction, cold reading tactics are usually used. It's called cold reading because the psychic is going into the reading cold without any prior research, and they use a couple of clever tricks to fool their audience. But with a few tools and a little prep time, psychics can perform a hot reading, in which they do research prior to preying on their victim. I'm gonna reveal some of the methods that these vultures use so that the next time one of them tries to take advantage of you and tells you to have an open mind,
don't be closed-minded.
You can do so with guarded skepticism, remembering the old skeptic maxim, keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out. The first and most obvious method of gathering information is internet research.
C'est niet? Oui, oui, bien. Je hebt een vriendin, Julie de... Ja. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen, 795.000 euro.
Ja, eigenlijk.
Oh my god. Oh man. Ah, dat is, ik weet niet, eng.
Most people don't realize just how much information about them is publicly available on the web. When people buy tickets online to psychic shows, at bare minimum they enter their full name, billing info, and email address. You may be thinking that a spineless con artist can plug that info into a people search site or a private investigator software package to glean public records, including a person's address, phone number, marital status, criminal background, and more. But they don't even need to do that. In a packed out audience, there are bound to be at least a few dozen people with no Facebook privacy settings set. Sites like Ancestry.com reveal the names of relatives as well as family death records. And tools like Google Maps and Street View show cross streets, neighborhood info, and even details about what the person's house looks like. Knowing this, is it really that impressive when a psychic says that they're seeing a red door? It's even less impressive when a psychic does a reading of any kind of celebrity figure whose information is publicly accessible all over the web.
I'd known there was plenty of information regarding my past readily available with a cursory internet search, including an extensive interview I'd given to a website 2 years before.
And would you know Susan?
Yes.
Was Susan your mother?
Yes.
How interesting. You're part of two families, you're saying to me. That makes sense to you?
Yes.
Are you adopted?
Yes.
Oh.
But I wasn't prepared for what happened next.
Do you know the name of L.E.? Leonard or Leon or Leo, L-E-O something?
Yes.
Leo.
Leo was the name of my adoptive mother's longtime companion, whom I loved as a stepfather for almost 25 years. Leo died suddenly in 2009, until I looked again upon my return home, and there it was, a reference to his passing, able to be exploited along with all the rest.
But not all research is done over the web. Some shows have information packets for audience members to fill out before the show, asking attendees who they wish to connect with. This is a pre-internet trick that goes back to the days of faith healers like Peter Popoff, only he called them prayer cards.
To his followers, Popoff seemed to have divine powers. He also knew the personal details of their lives. The radio scanner we brought to the hall picked up a decidedly worldly source.
Hello, Petey. Can you hear me? If you can't, you're in trouble.
Popoff was being prompted by his wife through a wireless earpiece. She'd gotten her information from prayer cards filled out by the faithful before the show began.
She wants to get rid of the walker.
You want to get rid of this walker, sister?
She lives at 1627 10th Street.
1627 10th Street? Is that right?
That's right. She has arthritis all over.
burning this arthritis.
Since Popoff's days, earpieces have gotten smaller, cheaper, and more commonplace, and Popoff is far from the only person claiming to have otherworldly information sources who's been caught wearing an earpiece.
A member of the audience claimed they heard a man backstage feeding Sally information in secret.
A fan who was sitting in the back row of the Grand Canal Theatre in Dublin during one of Psychic Sally's shows told a radio station that she could hear a man's voice through an open window behind her, claiming that everything he said the psychic was saying 10 seconds later. Well, she says that only her headset is purely a microphone she does not receive. That's what she said.
The headset with the microphone is purely a microphone, and she can't get messages from that, but she hasn't denied having a separate earpiece, which is on the other side. If you have a look at her biopic, it's called The Psychic Life of Sally Morgan. There's a shot of her walking off stage, taking off the microphone, and a separate earpiece which she leaves dangling. It's an earpiece.
Now this explains how psychics can get amazingly accurate hits on their own turf, but how do they pull off this same feat on other people's shows? Well, it's pretty easy to rig the reading by planting a few of your own people in the audience of a show that you'll be on, which Rosemary Altia's agent got caught doing by Penn and Teller in an episode of Bullshit.
I know that she took her own life.
How did she know it was a suicide? I knew there had to be some link. The suicide is not something you want to be wrong about.
Joni spoke with Rosemary about the possibility of our being here.
And who's Joni?
Joni is Rosemary's literary agent.
That's right. She works for Rosemary. Joni asked us if she could bring people to the taping. Suspecting a setup, we agreed.
Turns out, that they are her literary agent's best friends. So, that took the air out of that one.
It's raining.
Bullshit.
Or how about the self-proclaimed psychic Joe Power? When Joe's own agent supplied a client named Vunda, Joe got hit after amazing hit. But on further investigation by magician Darren Brown, it turned out that
Joe has always said he did not know any of her details. But what I've discovered is that Vonda's next-door neighbour is in fact Joe's sister.
And even if cheaters didn't stack the deck by rigging the audience, they often sift the crowd for information prior to the start of a show.
It's a mother-son connection here. I feel I got your mother here trying to communicate with you, okay?
Yes. How'd she know that this poor guy's mother was going to come through?
If we look at the tape again, the first thing she did when she arrived was drift right over to the people who she knew were going to be in the audience. So the information gathering starts immediately.
Who do you want to connect with?
My mother.
Who do you want to connect with?
My mother. My mother. My mother.
Your mother? It's a mother-son connection here. I feel I got your mother here trying to communicate with you, okay?
Yes.
Rosemary's hardly the only one. The Long Island medium, Theresa Caputo, requested 45 minutes alone and without cameras with Howard Stern's audience as a prerequisite to going on his show.
Will spoke to her because we were thinking about having her on at one point. The first thing is, we can't just bring people in. You know what I'm saying?
For her to read, you mean?
Yeah, we can't bring people in for her to read.
There's rules.
Well, yeah, because you know what? You pick up different vibes from different people. And she absolutely needed 45 minutes alone, completely alone, no cameras with the people.
With the people.
Yeah.
Sal, we're not interested in leaving people alone with the Long Island Psychic for 45 minutes. Right. It's never going to happen. And you should give up on it.
But what happens when these same psychics are asked to do a spontaneous reading on someone without being able to perform prior research? Well, they have to resort to cold reading, which I'll cover the techniques for that in my next video, so make sure that you're subscribed and you hit the bell button so that you get notified. But till then, here are some of the same psychics you just saw absolutely bombing later on in the same exact show when asked to give a spontaneous reading.
I'm seeing a man who is standing by your side, quite broad set, big, very black. He tells me he had a massive heart attack prior to his passing. He just went bang, just like that. And he refers to you as his boy. Okay? Confusing you?
Yeah. Or there was some type of split up going back quite a while.
No.
Okay, why did you mention 17 years ago then? Is the Jimmy or James connected?
No.
She's saying yes on grandfather's side?
No.
But I have a man who is standing between us. Passed with cancer, was very, very sick before he died. You understand what I'm saying, don't you?
I understand.
Okay.
But I don't know who that could be.
Okay, well, he's just...
And when we asked him to read our producer on the spot, that didn't go so well.
I'm tired.
Okay.
I'm not gonna be able to give you a clear quality thing, so...
We both know what you are. I mean, let's be honest here. You're a con man.
The universe is knowable. One need not appeal to mystical, magical forces to account for things.
In my last video, I talked about hot reading techniques that psychics use to research their victims ahead of time. But what about when they have to read a live audience or read a stranger on the spot? For that, they usually resort to cold reading tactics. If you're unfamiliar with their tricks, it may seem impressive, but if you know what to look for, then a psychic hustle will smell fishier than a rotten tuna. Now, there's a lot more to cold reading than I could possibly cover in just one video, so make sure that you subscribe and keep an eye out for part 2. The most obvious aspect of cold reading is shotgunning, where you shotgun out a question into the audience and hope that it sticks with someone somewhere.
Who had the issue with the brain? Aneurysm, brain tumor, Alzheimer, or dementia?
But for those, some people watching this will say, and I'm a skeptic, will say, look, you're, in a room of 250 people, whatever, somebody will certainly have had Alzheimer's.
It's the details that spirit gives is what is mind-blowing. It is not common that someone would lay someone to rest in a fuchsia dress.
But did she really get a fuchsia dress?
Who was buried in a red dress? Or someone was viewed, because they had me stand at a casket and I saw someone viewed and they said, can you believe that this is how I was laid to rest?
Notice how she started specific with a red dress, then went more vague. If you start specific and get a hit, people are pretty impressed, but by resorting and shifting to a vaguer image, she increases her odds of getting a hit. Sure enough, someone on the other side of the room buried someone in a fuchsia dress.
My mother was in a fuchsia dress.
But wait a second. Caputo seemed to imply that she guessed the fuchsia dress.
It's the details that spirit gives is what is mind-blowing. It is not common that someone would lay someone to rest in a fuchsia dress,
making it seem like she was more accurate than before. Remember, she guessed either a red dress or an odd burial, not a fuchsia dress, which is what the lady on the other side of the room connected with. But let's be generous and give Caputo the benefit of the doubt here. Let's not assume that she's trying to mislead, and maybe that she just misremembered or didn't articulate her thoughts very well. Even still, how is it that psychics like her seem to get nothing but hits with audience members? When a person in the audience connects with something, psychics often fire off a barrage of questions, reading a person's body language to see if they got a hit or not. If the person's nodding, smiling, or crying, they'll pause and let them elaborate, but if they look puzzled or taking too long thinking about it or shaking their head, the psychic is quick to rattle off more questions until one of them sticks.
Does that make sense? Or do you understand that?
Well,
who passed from the chest?
This way, the misses are less obvious and only the hits stick, and when they do, they resonate. The person, after all, is desperately hoping for a connection and is usually more than willing to help the psychic out and make the guesses fit.
We both lost our brother, Bob.
Bob's spirit's here,
And if it becomes obvious that nothing's sticking, the psychic can easily excuse it away with something like, I could be piggybacking.
Because I might be piggybacking.
Or it could be someone else in this area.
Somebody's in prison. Or somebody was in prison. So in this section, somebody was in prison.
Or think about it, you could remember later.
Maybe have a think about it. It may come back a little bit later on. Okay.
But how do they get a hit with something like, I'm feeling a father figure who died of cancer with a J name like James connected? If you're going to make a guess as a psychic, and let's face it, all cold reading is a series of questions, guesses, general statements, and inferences based on observation, you're going to want those guesses to be high probability, without people realizing that you're playing the odds. Here's a great example. James Van Praagh has just turned his back and had the show host give some ribbons to a random person in the audience for him to blindly read by holding a matching pair of ribbons.
Is this a female that is holding these? Yes.
No shit, Sherlock. You're in a room packed with women. I see maybe 4 dudes in the entire audience, but most psychics are more discreet than this. If I claim to be a psychic and guess that someone in a crowd knows a John Smith, nobody would be impressed. But did you know that James, not John, is the most common guy's name in the US?
Who is James?
Who has the Jim in that family? Or the James?
Is the Jimmy or James connected?
For girls, the most common name is Mary.
The name of either Mary, Margaret.
Is there a Mary person, like a Marie, a Mary?
Got a connection to Mary. I'm getting Marie, Mary, Maria.
And who is the MR name? Mark, Mary, Marie.
While people are more impressed when a psychic guesses an exact name, more often than not, psychics just guess an initial.
I feel he's like a J.
He's also showing me a J.
Why can't they just talk? Why does it got to be, there's a J name, there's a this?
Well, because even when guessing the most common guy's name in America, these vultures still get misses.
No.
Is he J-A or J-U? Or is he's not John or
I don't know the name. Jerry, Jeffrey?
Jez.
Jez. Okay, close enough. I don't know that I get that.
No. Because
Was it James?
If they go from James to a J sounding name, then they can radically increase their odds. But sometimes even that fails.
Or J.
Is it J sounding?
Or G, it could be G.
Is her sister Jerry?
Bingo. Throw in a J sounding G name like George, Gerald, etc. and they even further increase their odds.
They tell me to talk about the J or G name like Jack or James. They tell me to talk about the J or G connection. There's a J or G name that they want me to highlight.
Is there a J or G in that name, like Marjorie?
Is that where like the J or G like George or Jerry comes up? Where's the J or G name? Are you the J or G sounding name like Janie or Joni? Who is the J name?
It's a J or G.
Giovanni, but we called him Johnny.
Jim? Judith?
My name's Jade.
Because it would be too time consuming to examine every name in America, let's look at the top 200 names in the US over the last 100 years according to the Social Security Administration. 38 of the top 200 names in America start with J or G. That's 19%. To keep the math simple, we'll say 1 in 5. That doesn't seem like that high of a number, but think of it this way. Here's an example of a pretty small family tree. Only counting close relatives like grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, siblings, nephews, nieces, and cousins, there are already 20 people here. If you're married, you can double that number with in-laws. But I don't want people to accuse me of exaggerating, so I'll lowball the estimate. Now take that 1 in 5 statistic. Odds are that about 4 people in this family of 20 will have a J or a G name. Assuming that no one in the audience is married or has a massive family, then in an audience of about 250 people, there will be approximately 1,000 J or G name family members represented. Now most people who go to these types of readings go to connect with one or multiple lost family members, meaning that there's probably at least 250 deceased people represented by this audience. If 1 in 5 of those 250 have J or G names, then that's 50 deceased people with J or G names represented in an audience this size. And remember, that's on the low end, assuming everyone has a small family and isn't married. But most people in these audiences are older, probably have larger families, and have probably married at least once, so that number is almost definitely much higher. Now, the leading causes of death in the US are heart disease and cancer by a long shot, usually targeting the middle-aged or elderly. In a room full of adults, it's pretty high odds that someone has lost a father to one of these causes.
Who had the heart problem?
But just to be safe, the psychic can increase their odds further by guessing a father figure, which includes fathers, uncles, grandfathers, fathers-in-law, adopted fathers, or just a fatherly friend.
I feel like there's a father figure reference that they want me to bring through, but that to me would be like father, uncle, grandfather.
First thing I have a man here is a father figure that comes to me, and I'm gonna feel like I'm over here.
They tell me to acknowledge a male figure to the side who has crossed over. That to me would be like husband, brother, cousin, or friend. Is your dad passed?
No.
Who's the father figure who's passed?
My grandfather.
Your grandfather, and he must have been like a dad figure for you, and in some respects,
It feels more like a father in the spirit world.
I don't know if your dad's passed, but in that back section, I've got an older male who's coming through back there. But it's an older male energy that's maybe like father, uncle, grandfather. Okay, is there a father figure that's passed? Older male figure that's passed that would be like a father figure.
Now, if you throw it all together, you have a deceased father figure who died of cancer, and there's a J or a G connected. Notice, to increase their odds even higher, they don't say that the person who passed had a J or G name. They just say a J or G name is connected to the deceased.
They tell me to talk about the J or G connection.
As in, they're related to someone with a J or G name, which remember, is just about everybody. Now, these are the same exact types of tricks used by mentalists.
When you take a look at a lot of the mediums out there, I know exactly what those mediums are doing, and I think many of them are scum. I think they're taking advantage of people in a very vulnerable moment.
And there is nothing supernatural about rigging the odds in your favor, making a hit a statistical inevitability. It's easy to roll 6s every time when you play with loaded dice, and it's easy to fool vulnerable and grieving audience members when they're too desperate to realize you've stacked the deck. But once they get these hits, they narrow in on one person. How do they continue to get hit after hit? Well, assuming that they're not doing a hot reading, which I covered in my last video, then they're probably using other cold reading tricks, including Barnum statements, which I'll cover in my next video. Psychics are tricky little bastards, and it's easy to fall for their ploy if you don't know what to look out for. This is a continuation of a series exposing their tactics, so make sure that you check out my previous videos on hot reading, cold reading tactics, and my psychic fail compilation videos, and subscribe for the next episode in this series. When you hear a statement like, "You sometimes feel an extroverted urge to burst out of your shell, but reservations frequently inhibit these feelings and you're often comfortable allowing others to get the attention," how accurate is this description of you? This is an example of a rainbow ruse, a statement that attributes someone with opposing personality traits and lets confirmation bias do the rest. You see, nobody is entirely introverted or entirely extroverted. If you're more extroverted, you'll think, wow, I'm extroverted and sometimes introverted. This statement applies to me. And if you're more introverted, you'll think, wow, I'm introverted and sometimes extroverted. This statement applies to me. That's why this type of statement works so well, because the exact inverse of it works just as well. I would say that you often feel quiet and reserved, but when the mood strikes you, you can easily become the center of attention. If you're able to read someone's body language, it's not hard to slip a rainbow ruse into a live reading, making the rainbow ruse a valuable tool in a psychic con artist's toolkit.
And I get the sense that she's, for some reason or another, a little nervous.
The bereaved son doesn't respond to nervous, so Rosemary completely turns it around.
Which is so not like her, because she's really talkative and pushy and out there.
Yes. Nice save. Was she tall and short too?
Next, we have Barnum statements, named after P.T. Barnum, whose circus claimed to have something for everyone. These are statements that literally apply to almost everyone. Statements like,
recently you have had to recover from a disappointment. Your sexual adjustment has presented some problems for you. You have a great deal of unused capacity.
Other examples of Barnum statements include, you had an accident when you were a child involving water. You have a box of old unsorted photographs in your house. Or asking if an elderly person had pain in their legs, hips, or back, had trouble walking, or took a rough fall in their old age.
And what about trouble with legs?
Do you understand the leg issue?
Who's having the issue with walking?
Was there a man with a cane, like a grandfather or a father with a cane?
This is Paul Zenon, a former psychic turned mentalist, exposing the tricks of psychics by reading a collection of Barnum statements to a TV audience. Without even directing it at the show host, he scored hit after hit with her, showing just how universally applicable these kinds of statements are.
There's an older man that you associate with the initial B, an older man who's probably in your family or close to your family, and he's always suffered long term with a pain at the sort of back of his chest region, okay? But when you think of him, you always think of that daft thing that he does that makes you laugh.
The letter B, my dad's Brian.
You're generally outgoing, you make friends easily, that would apply to number one as well. You are sociable, but just occasionally you feel really detached and insecure about yourself. It's almost as though you're kind of zooming out and watching yourself from a camera from above, something like that.
I'm on TV, so everybody thinks, oh, you're all chatting, this, that, and the other. But do you know, when I get home, I'm really quite quiet.
You've got a scar. It's only a small scar, and it's not from an operation, it was from an accident you had years ago, and it's on your left leg in the middle.
I have got a scar on my left leg in the middle.
You make friends very, very easily, but you've actually got very few close friends, and part of the reason for that is because you tend to bottle things up and you should let things go, and fairly recently you feel you were betrayed by a friend. It's actually partly your own fault, but you still feel like you're betrayed by a close friend.
All of those things.
You have a recurring dream where you're falling, right? Not falling, but almost flying down an escalator or some stairs, right? This alternates, you only have it very sporadically, with a dream about being held underwater. You're struggling to catch your breath.
Well, it's kind of me, basically. All the way through, she's going, that's me. That's me.
These are the same types of universally applicable phrases that psychics use.
Does somebody work in the food business?
Here's James Van Praagh shotgunning one of these Barnum statements out into a crowd.
Does someone have a scar on the foot?
I do.
Thank you.
Or here's Theresa Caputo asking a woman if her husband disliked the dish she cooked.
Did you always cook him certain foods, but he didn't like it?
If you're married to someone for years, you're pretty much guaranteed to find one dish that they're not fond of. Other Barnum statements apply to everyone in a particular demographic and can be used by psychics once they hone in on one specific person. For example, if I ask a 4-year-old Texan boy if one of his parents is usually cold, that won't necessarily result in a hit. But when Caputo asked this elderly New Yorker woman,
did your mom always complain about being cold?
That's a guaranteed hit. Old people just get cold. It's what they do. Most grandparents' thermostats have 2 settings, lava and the surface of the sun. Or here's Rosemary Altia asking this black dude if he had a family member who was
very black.
Now, so much of the psychic guessing game relies on the audience to do most of the work.
Do you understand that?
This is no more apparent than when they throw out a number and ask their sitter to make it fit somehow.
How do you connect with the number 13 and 15? I don't know if they're ages or the 13th or 15th of a month, or it can stand for January, March, and May.
Like an all-seeing spirit would use the number 13 or 15 to represent January? Come on. But let's look at one a little more specific.
There's a 5 connection, 5 kids or 5 of one sex. So I don't know if she had 5 kids. She did, okay.
That seems either pretty lucky or like a rather impressive hit. But what if she'd missed? What happens when a psychic gets a miss on a question like this?
And where are the 5 kids in the family?
Yeah, there's more than 5.
Tell me.
6.
So out of the psychic math now we know we do 5 minus 1, right?
What you talking about, Will?
5 are similar, 1's different.
Okay.
So how can I have 5 being similar, 1 being different?
Not sure.
Is it that 5 are living and 1's past? Or
no,
6 are living
there's,
in
yeah,
the
there's 6 girls and...
how many total?
I thought you were the psychic.
Sorry, there's 8 altogether in the siblings.
9.
Does that mean 9? Sorry. Sorry.
9.
Thank you.
So there's
We're all
6
sisters.
6
Okay.
girls and 3 boys have passed. Males.
So I need to do it my way, it's got to be 5 and 4, where 5 have something in common and 4 are different. So are 5 close in age, 4 further apart, or how many total passed?
3.
No. I don't know how to split it, but I know it's got to be 5 and 4.
It's okay, John Edward. I'm sure you'll find some way out of this situation.
And I know that somebody passed from something impacted to their head or something that affects their head, correct?
Oh, just dismiss it and move on. No one will notice, right? Thomas Westbrook notices. When a psychic throws out a number,
Where's the family of 5 of you?
there's almost no limit to the number of ways you can make this fit. 5 siblings counting yourself, 5 siblings not counting yourself, 4 kids and a miscarriage, counting and not counting you, family of 5 counting parents, 2 kids, 2 parents and a miscarriage, counting and not counting you, 5 boys and any number of girls, 5 girls and any number of boys, a mom and 4 girls, a dad and 4 boys, and you can apply this to your parents and siblings, or to your wife and kids, or to your wife's family. Or you can search for this number in the family of the deceased loved one. The list of possible combinations goes on and on and on, but if you're going to a reading hoping to connect with a lost loved one, you will eventually find a way to make the number stick. Just be aware that the psychic is simply throwing out a number and the sitter is doing all of the work for them.
Where's the family of 5 of you then? Is it this 5 then? Is it like 5 of yous, or is it 5 connections?
Or some might refer to it, 6.
Psychic math, psychic math, psychic math.
There's a 2 or a twin connection as well. Does she have 2 children now?
She had 2 more after him.
Somebody's 1 of 3?
My cousin was 1 of 3, with the 3rd being a second marriage.
How do you connect with the number 3? You have 3 children?
I have 2 children.
And you had a miscarriage?
No, I didn't have a miscarriage, but I consider my husband my 3rd child.
So do psychics really talk with the dead? It's possible, but we know exactly how to replicate the results they get using purely natural methods. You don't have to use every one of these tricks to come off as psychic. The pre-show work covered in my hot reading video, the high probability guesses I exposed in my first cold reading video, the rainbow ruse, Barnum statements, these numbers games. Any one of these tricks on its own is enough to fool an emotionally vulnerable victim unfamiliar with these tactics. And time again, hucksters claiming to be psychics have been caught using these exact same methods. Or perhaps I'm a raving lunatic and aligning your chakras with hippie crystals, transcendental meditation, and incense burning when the planets are aligned will open your 3rd eye, allowing you to talk with dead people, read the Akashic records, connect with gods, and prepare yourself for reincarnation, overturning everything we know about how the world works and every law of physics known to man. But before you hand over your life savings to a psychic guru to guide you on your spiritual quest, let's explore how we can test psychic claims scientifically, or if we can test them at all. Are science and spiritualism 2 non-overlapping magisteria? Or is that just a concession made by some scientist exhausted at this science versus the paranormal battle that's been hijacked and used as a hippy-dippy cop-out by cash-hungry con artists terrified of being exposed? We'll cover that in my next video. So make sure you're subscribed and click that bell button to get notified.
I got interested in mind reading and fortune-telling, fake fortune-telling, you know? And I got to know a lot of old fakes who had retired as millionaires, you know? And they told me their secrets. How you do it. There are things that are called cold readings. A cold reading is you warm up the sucker by telling him things that he says, how could he ever know that, you see? You say, you know, between the ages of 13 and 15, you had a great change came in your life. But that happens in everybody's life.
If there is something to the paranormal, let's find out what it is, if anything. And on the other hand, let's not be taken in by the claptrap that is being offered us and at our expense.
Psychic powers. Whether it's telekinesis, psychic healing, astral projection, seeing auras, or detecting water, or even talking with the dead.
I see dead people.
People claiming to have supernatural powers are all around us. But is there any merit to these types of claims? And can you test them scientifically to know for sure? Most psychics agree that their powers can be tested.
Before we started filming, Joe agreed in principle to undertake a scientific test.
Are you willing to take his test?
Yeah, whatever test it is.
But you'd be willing to do that, right?
Yes, I would be willing to do that.
Do you think you can have the $1 million?
Oh, absolutely.
Even if scientists couldn't detect any kind of psychic energy field with their current instruments, we would at least be able to measure the effects that this field has on the physical world. Effects like psychic healing tested against a placebo, telekinesis of objects inside of an airtight container, clairvoyance, and precognition of unlikely events outside of the psychic's control. If psychic waves of energy actually healed people, moved objects, or allowed for remote viewing, that's something we can test. Let's examine a few ways that this can and has been done. Claim 1. Seeing auras. A psychic claims that they can see other people's unique auras, even glowing through walls. You work with the psychic to devise an experiment that you both agree upon to test that claim. You find an opaque wall that they claim that they can see people's unique auras through. Have an unbiased third party randomly place people behind the wall in a specific order. Then have those people come forward and have the psychic place them in the correct order based on their auras.
If, as you claim, you can see auras through the screen, John should now be standing in the same position as he was when he was behind the screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
If they're actually psychic, they should consistently score significantly higher than chance, and ideally will get it 100% every single time. Claim 2. Water divining. A group of water dowsers claims that they can psychically detect the location of water using various types of dowsing rods. You work with them to devise an experiment to test it that they're happy with. You bury 10 pipes a meter apart. See-through holes at the end allow third-party, unbiased judges to make sure that water is or isn't flowing through them. The water diviners examine the entire mechanism, test it to make sure that it's clear of any interference prior to running water through the pipes, and any prior objections that they have are listened to and accommodated for.
One does get a residual effect for some time afterwards. I would not be certain in my own mind whether it was moisture within the pipe or a possible magnetic effect caused by the initial flowing of the water.
Okay. Now, we have attempted to get around that. That's always a possibility, of course. The site that you'll see up there is built on a slope. They're a couple of feet from one end to the other. The water is being gravity fed. It's being brought in from a hydrant. It goes into a drum, and from the drum it flows into the pipe. So it's not being directly pumped through. It's not being forced through in gushes like that. Not only that, when the valves are opened up, all of the pipes drain out because they are running downhill.
Water is then run through one of the pipes with the dowser's knowledge to make sure that they can, or at least think that they can, psychically detect it.
Are you satisfied with the conditions?
They appear to be quite okay, Bob, yes.
That seems pretty fair to me.
Everything that we have asked for so far has been met with, and I think this is fair enough.
You then start randomly selecting one pipe at a time to run water through, and the psychics, using nothing but their dowsing rods, have to determine which pipe the water is flowing through. Now perform this test multiple times. You can perform a similar test by placing gold or any other substance they claim they can detect in a random box. In both cases, the water dowser's hits should be considerably higher than what you would expect from random guesses and chance alone. Claim 3. Talking with the dead. Someone claims that they can talk with the dead. This type of claim is harder to test, due to the large number of clues given away in a cold reading. One method would be to place someone on one side of an opaque curtain with the psychic on the other side, so that the psychic can't pick up on things like their gender, age, ethnicity, marital status, etc. For the sitter, choose someone from Ireland where names are impossible to spell or pronounce, like Teague or O'Sheen. Or better yet, Zimbabwe, where parents traditionally give their kids very unusual English names like Polling Station Namoinesu, Trimor Simangu, and Released Results Matongo. I kid you not, those are actual names in Zimbabwe. Record the reading, but don't allow the sitter to respond or give any kind of feedback. Then analyze the reading afterwards and compare it to the results you would expect to get by chance. If they're psychic, their hits should far exceed their misses, and rather than guessing common English names like James, John, or Mary, they'll come up with Ballot Box Mahosi, Have a Look Doob, Evine, or Limited Chikafa. Claim 4. Psychic healing. Procure a large sample of individuals suffering from a non-lethal ailment that the psychic claims she can cure supernaturally. Divide your sample into 3 groups. The first is a control group and won't receive any treatment. The second will receive the psychic healing procedure. Make sure that the psychic keeps a distance of at least a foot or two to prevent them from secretly administering any kind of medication. If they insist on touching the patient, search them prior to the procedure and have them thoroughly wash and disinfect their hands. The third group receives the placebo. They're also told that they're receiving a psychic healing treatment, but instead of a psychic, have an actor in a long white robe wave spirit fingers over the patient while thinking about Toy Story 2. Make sure that the experiment is performed double-blind. In other words, every patient assumes that they're being seen by an actual psychic, and the doctors administering the test are kept in the dark as to which one is the actor. Now just measure the recovery rates of all three groups. If the psychic healer actually has psychic powers, there should be a statistically significant difference in recovery rates between the healer and the actor, well outside the margin of error, and it should be higher than the control group. Now, either these exact tests or similar ones to them have been performed hundreds of times over the last 50 years by the James Randi Educational Foundation and have never yielded a single positive result favoring psychic claims.
111 tries were undertaken. There were a total of 15 successful, and that makes approximately a percentage of 12%. So the result was just a little over the 10%.
It's equivalent to throwing a dart at random into a dartboard or flipping coins or choosing cards at random. Please reveal which position you were originally standing in by showing us, I think it's inside your hat, isn't it? Take them off and let's see. C, B, D, A, and E. So out of this, we obtained 2 correct. All right. So, James, you got 2 out of 5 correct, and I take my hat off to you for trying.
And yet you still have psychics claiming to have passed rigorous scientific testing. How is that possible? In an ideal world, testing people's claims of psychic powers should be as easy as performing a clinical trial. Anyone should be able to do it. And for many claims, it is. A great number of self-proclaimed psychics truly believe that they have supernatural powers and sincerely wish to demonstrate them. For them, an honest scientific test like the ones above should be sufficient. But the downside to testing psychic claims in a lab is that scientists aren't usually trained in dealing with deception. And some psychics actually are skilled liars or magicians and can be pretty deceptive. Most lab technicians aren't used to their subjects trying to manipulate them. Lab rats don't cheat, but humans aren't lab rats, and humans do. In my next video, we'll cover a few instances in which psychics manage to fool scientists in a lab, and we'll talk about some of the ways to safeguard against psychic trickery when running tests like this.
As a mentalist, it simply means that I'm an entertainer. I'm taking my 5 known sense to create the illusion of a 6th sense.
Fingertips on top of table. Table will follow the fingertips into the air, defying the laws of gravity.
Some people cannot believe that a magician can fool them in such a way that they can't figure it out. But magicians can, and magicians do. Don't be too sure of yourself. No matter how smart or well-educated you are, you can be deceived.
It's magic, all right, but the table is helped along in its rise by a couple rulers the boys have stuck up their sleeves and under the table edge.
Whether it's sleight of hand, misdirection, or psychological manipulation, we all know that magicians can and do fool us. If you've been watching my series exposing psychics, you also know that many psychics have been caught using various magic tricks. But have psychics ever been able to demonstrate their abilities under scientifically controlled conditions? And if so, did they fool the scientists using trickery? Just how hard is it for a psychic to fool a scientist?
We present a case of a double-blind experiment in which someone places an object into a can chosen at random from 10 aluminum cans. Geller's task now is to determine which of these 10 cans holds the steel ball bearing. He has made his choice. The steel ball is found.
What I do is real.
This is Uri Geller, one of the most famous psychics of the 20th century. In the 1970s, he drew massive attention for demonstrating psychic abilities at the Stanford Research Institute, not affiliated with Stanford University. So much so that the Department of Defense sent a psychologist and former magician, Dr. Ray Hyman, to investigate and check for trickery. This was during the Cold War, and the prospect of using psychic warfare against the Soviets wasn't something that the US government could risk passing up. After thorough investigation, Hyman determined that there was no verifiable evidence of psychic abilities, and shortly afterwards the CIA cut funding to their psychic research branch because after years of testing, it yielded no actionable intelligence.
He's a fraud, but you can't blame people for believing him. Geller is more the product of a wonderful public relations campaign than he is the product of being a clever illusionist. What the public gets is only one side of the story. For example, I spent the whole day with him, and I know some other scientists who spent quite a bit of time with him who weren't impressed with him. He's been caught cheating several occasions.
Cheating how? What kind of cheating?
Oh, they've caught him switching envelopes. His girlfriend, Hannah Strang, has confessed to the Israeli weekly, Halom Hazer, that she helped sitting in the audiences with him, coding him. She and her brother, Shippy Strang, who's always with him, coding information to him from his for his shows.
Coding information.
Sending signals to him about, one of the things he does on his show is he has people write on a blackboard. His back is to the blackboard, but he's facing the audience. They sit in the audience and code to him, signal him by hand signals, what was written on a blackboard.
Geller was later exposed live on The Tonight Show by Johnny Carson, who was informed ahead of time as to how exactly Uri was doing his tricks.
I said, okay, what I would like you to do with the little aluminum film cans is I would like you to coat them on the bottom with rubber cement. Don't glue them down to the tray, just coat the bottoms and let them dry. When they're put on the tray, they won't skid then. I said, because the way he does the film can thing is he rotates the tray and he sees which ones move differently.
He is really suspicious, you know. I'm having a hard time with you.
I don't mean to be, right? I really don't.
Just keep looking. Okay, let me rest a little, all right?
All right. Uri was telling me you don't feel, what, strong tonight?
I don't feel strong. It's not all tonight. Right now I'm feeling being pressed and then I can't...
Well, I'm not trying to press you, I really not. I'm not trying to be skeptical. I would love to see these things, I really would.
But Uri's celebrity status was unaffected, and to many the jury still seemed to be out as to whether or not he actually possessed psychic abilities.
Magicians say no, nonsense, I duped the scientists. They say I fooled them. They always find loopholes. I challenge them and tell them, look, why don't you go and do it in a laboratory the way I was tested?
So in 1979, Washington University set up Project Alpha at the McDonald Laboratory to scientifically test for the existence of psychic abilities. But unbeknownst to them, their two research subjects, Steve Shaw and Michael Edwards, were actually magicians, determined to show just how easily even scientists could be fooled without the proper safeguards in place. The magician James Randi advised the scientists as to ways to safeguard their experiments.
We have a point of view of the magician. We know how people are fooled and how they fool themselves, which is even more important.
One of Randy's caveats was mark every item with an indelible mark or a scratch that couldn't be replicated, something that was permanent and it was something that we couldn't duplicate on the spot.
But their flexibility on those safeguards allowed Shaw and Edwards to fool the scientists for over 4 years.
It was very quickly, though, that Steve and I tried to almost line by line get them to violate every one of those caveats in one way, shape, or form. The parapsychologists, in their infinite wisdom, decided that they would simply use paper tags with string.
Can we get this tag off here? Sure. Just slide it off.
We took these paper hanging tags off of the spoons to make them easier to work with. As everybody was focusing on one spoon, it was a simple matter to lean on the control spoon and later switch those two tags so the control spoon looked like the experimental spoon.
Yeah, it's markedly different, of course it is.
After a long day of testing where nothing really happened, I guess something spectacular happened because we got a call very early the next morning. It said it looked like a psychic tornado had hit the Mac lab. And they were very amazed by this, and they really kind of put that or gave credit to the fact that it was, like, in their own words, a psychic tornado had hit, but it was the cause of us building up all of our energies that day and being frustrated by not having it work, and it hit at night. Yeah. Now, the fact was, I couldn't pick the locks. As you know, I used to be an escape artist. I couldn't pick the locks to get into the lab, but I could leave one of the windows open. And Steve and I at 2 in the morning slipped into the lab, twisted all the metal we could find to move the objects around, changed the times on the clocks, and then surreptitiously got out of the building without leaving any trace of that.
I don't believe they're tricking us, especially based on the research that we've done in the last year, where we have exerted as tight a control condition as we could think of, even in consultation with magicians, to see if the influence holds up. And we have found evidence that it does. not as strongly under these control conditions. It's as if somehow the extra controls seem to inhibit it, but still an effect persists.
Can you tell us, how do you do it?
I'll do it. Be quite honest, we cheat.
It just goes to show how easily even the most scientifically minded of us can be fooled if we're not careful.
Lawrence Livermore Labs has a bunch of physicists, all PhDs, I'm sure. I got a call from one of them a couple of years back. Said, oh boy, you're $1 million prize. It's won. Say goodbye to it. Said, I'll come. Well, a physicist from Israel came over here and brought with him a fellow named Ronnie Marcus. Ronnie Marcus was doing the Uri Geller Act, bending spoons and reading the contents of sealed envelopes and good stuff like this, all stuff which has been in the magician's repertoire for generations now. They said, we put him through a test, and he passed. He's the real thing, all right. This is what fooled him at Lawrence Livermore Labs. He asked them to get him a box of matches, ordinary box of matches, and of course, being scientists, they examined it with laser beams, scanned it in infrared and ultraviolet, weighed it to the millionth of a gram, way down there, examined each one of the matches very carefully, photographed it, polarized light, the whole thing, everything you can imagine. Complete analysis, made sure there were no threads, wires, magnets, nothing unusual about it. They got it themselves from Morton's Steakhouse. And they gave it to Ronnie Marcus, and this is what he did. He placed it in the back of his hand like this, and he said to them, whoops, he said, watch. The box will actually begin to rise. Look at this, it's rising. It's actually rising in the back of the hand. And it rose up, and then he said, and then when I relax the psychic power, it sinks back down again. Now, I don't know how it was done. But I'm working on it. As a matter of fact, this little parlor trick is in a book called Martin Gardner's Encyclopedia of Impromptu Tricks. It's very simple. You simply squeeze some of the skin on the back of your hand into the box as you close the box, and you like this, and it rises straight up like that, and then it goes all the way down again. A miracle of a semi-religious nature.
Stay skeptical. If you're looking for the paranormal and hoping to find it, without the proper safeguards to protect you from trickery, you probably will.
In the case of parapsychology, for example, I'm open-minded. There may be something to parapsychology, but most experimental psychologists are waiting for some kind of really repeatable evidence that will prove the claims of the parapsychologists. And they've been working on this now for almost a century, and they still have not come up with an experiment that can be replicated. The only explanation they give for the fact that that skeptics can't replicate their experiments is they say the skeptic's mind influences the experiment and causes negative results. So there's no way to argue against that. It just means that parapsychology will forever be in limbo, with the parapsychologists getting positive results and the skeptics forever failing to replicate the experiment.
The director of that program thought it was a very lousy thing to do. He was quoted as saying that you probably set back the study of it, and that it really...
If Philip said that, then my answer to my having set back the study of parapsychology is no. They tried to set it back. I brought it into the 20th century.
What's up, skeptics? Thomas Westbrook here. My guest today is a world-renowned magician and mentalist based in Las Vegas. He is a master of deception, even managing to fool scientists for over 4 years at the McDonald Research Institute at Washington University, convincing them that he possessed telekinetic psychic powers and showing just how easily anyone can be fooled. He helped expose the faith-healing charlatan Peter Popoff in 1986, and for years he managed the James Randi $1 Million Challenge, a $1 million prize for anyone who could prove under proper scientific controls that they possessed paranormal abilities. He's developed magic tricks for Chris Angel, David Blaine, and even the legendary bullet catch trick performed by Penn and Teller, who called his show the greatest mentalism act in the world. He has appeared on ABC, The Rolling Stone, Joe Rogan, Chris Angel, Mind Freak, Sci-Fi, and way too many other shows to list here. He is a legend in the world of scientific skepticism and a warrior for truth. Without any further ado, I give you the one, the only, Banachek.
Now, Banachek isn't a supernaturalist. He is the greatest mentalist alive, no question about it.
It's the late 1970s. The Cold War is in full swing. The US government, having just received word that the Soviets are experimenting with the possibility of psychic warfare, have set up their own program to investigate the possibility of the phenomenon. Alleged psychics began emerging, like Uri Geller, claiming he can move objects with his mind and psychokinetically bend metal, making it melt in front of you. And while his trickery would later be exposed, he even managed to pull off his feats under the watchful scrutiny of parapsychological researchers. In response to this, 2 skeptical magicians volunteer for a psychic research program at Washington State University called Project Alpha, under the guise of psychics, to show that without proper scientific controls, even scientists can be fooled. I'm joined today by a very special guest named Banachek, or Steve Shaw, and he was one of those 2 alpha kids who fooled the scientists. You're sitting there in the lab. What is going through your mind as they start putting silverware on the table and asking you to bend it?
Depends on the stage, right? I mean, in the very beginning, we thought that they were going to be using proper scientific controls, that they would have cameras behind one-way mirrors, and they would be observing us a lot closer than they were. So we thought that we might get caught. So it's this thing of, don't make it look like a magic trick. Make it look like it's real. Take your time, pace yourself, bend things on a micro level, not on a macro level, where they actually have to measure it to find out whether it's bent or not. These are the things that are going through our heads. You know, who's watching us? Is there a magician in the lab that's watching us? Are they trying to catch us, or are they just observing us?
So you were working also with the magician James Randi, who's also very skeptical of this stuff, and he had provided a list of several caveats to the scientists in order to safeguard against some of the trickery. Were you aware at the time that he had given them the caveats?
I was aware at the moment that the scientists showed us the caveats, read them, and things like don't work with more than one object at a time, don't let more than one subject work at a time because they could misdirect you, mark everything on a macro or a micro level. They showed me the list and they had a good laugh. They said, this would make you very uncomfortable. There's no way we can follow that kind of protocol. And who is Randy trying to send us this list? We can conduct this ourselves without his help.
So it's kind of the mindset that like scientists are used to. They work on lab rats, and lab rats don't lie.
Yeah, well, this is kind of what they thought about kids and teenagers. They thought that they didn't lie. Obviously, they didn't have children themselves. In the UK, they were working with very young kids, and the only way they caught those kids was quite by accident. They left the cameras running, and the moment that the adults left the room, the kids were taking the silverware that they couldn't bend with their little tiny hands because they were so young, and putting it under their feet and stepping on it and bending it that way.
That's what fooled them.
That's what fooled them, and that's how the kids got caught because of the cameras, yes.
Oh, Jesus. So for you, as soon as they said that they were scrapping that list, did that take a load off your shoulders?
Not really, because, hey, maybe they're just saying that. Maybe they're just trying to make us feel comfortable. And maybe that's a sort of a double, blind kind of thing that they're doing, but not double blind.
Like a misdirection.
Like a misdirection, yeah, to make us feel comfortable so that we would feel that we could conduct any trickery we want and not get caught so that we would get caught, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. It blows my mind, though, that you were able to pull this off, you said, for 4 years?
4 years, 180 hours total. So basically, we were going back and forth. We were going on holidays. We were leaving our job. We lost money doing this, going there to be tested by the scientists. But we convinced them that we could bend metal with our mind. We convinced them we could move objects with our mind, that we had other abilities outside the boundaries of known science.
What were you hoping as a kid? Like, was it kind of, this is just exciting, fun, I don't know what'll happen, but we'll see? Like, or was it something that, like, you were based in like noble goals? I'm going to, expose these psychic.
Well, something we didn't say here, we kind of left it towards the end, is that I was actually working with the amazing Randi, hence the reason Randi knew every test we were doing. But he was giving the scientists every opportunity to detect that it was trickery, every opportunity to use proper science, because he would find out exactly what tests we had just performed, and then he would immediately send them a letter. Look, if you're ever doing this type of test, you may want to do X, Y, Z. They never caught on that the amazing Randi knew that we were doing those particular tests. You see, for years, scientists had admitted there was no evidence of ESP under proper scientific controls because of lack of funding. It was my contention, it was Randy's contention, and Mike Edwards, the other kid that was there with me, was also a magician, unbeknownst to the scientists. It was our contention that it had nothing to do with funding. It had to do with them all going in with a pro-biased opinion. In other words, people were attracted to parapsychology because they believed in parapsychology or they wanted it to be genuine. And they were not going to use proper scientific scientific controls to find out whether it was real or not, but rather they were going to be documenting what they already believed. And the other thing was they thought they were too smart to be fooled. We thought because they had PhDs, they wouldn't listen to the expert opinion of somebody who didn't like the amazing Randi, but basically had a PhD in magic, even though that's not really a thing, but could detect the trickery, understand the body language, understand what looks like magic and what is going on, and could explain it to them. And that's exactly what happened during those 4 years. They refused his help, even though he was willing to give his help. And had they accepted it, of course, we were working with Randi, so Randi would have immediately said, yep, they're working for us. I mean, we put a lot of rules in place for ourselves. We said that if they ever ask us if we're magicians, we have to say yes. If
they never asked you.
If they ask us if we're working with the amazing Randi, we had to say yes. The closest they ever came was right towards the end of the 4 years, when Randi was at a conference, a parapsychology conference, and he let out 2 rumors. And they were pretty close to identical rumors, but slightly different. One was the truth, that Mike and I were working with the amazing Randi to fool those scientists. The other one is that those scientists were working with Mike and I and Randi to fool the rest of the parapsychological community. So when we showed up next time, they said, hey, we heard these rumors. We heard that you and Mike were working with the amazing Randi to try to fool us. And Mike and I are both in our heads going, uh-oh, we need to come clean on this. And then they started laughing. They said, yeah, there was even a funnier rumor than that one. It was that we were working with Randi and you guys to fool the rest of the parapsychologists. They never, ever asked us. Had they had done research on my background, they would have found out that I was posing as not that I was posing, but they would have found out that I was a psychic, that I had these abilities, because Randi and I had set it up. I had written Randi many years early when I started out. I said, if you ever need a kid full scientist, I'd be happy to do so, only if I can come out and say it's an illusion afterwards. And Randi says, well, if you do any newspaper articles or anything like that, make sure that they think that you're a genuine psychic, so we can set that up so that if they do any background checks on you. Had they done background checks on Mike, they would have found out that he was an escape artist, a magician, but they never did.
Where would they have looked for something like that at the time? This was pre-internet days.
Local newspapers, a couple of phone calls, that's all you have to make.
Gotcha. Coming out of that, though, when you finally broke the news and you revealed that it was trickery, how did they react? How did they respond?
They did not want to believe that it was trickery. I have the phone call of one of the scientists, and they were not answering the phone. We had a press conference in New York, Time Life Building, where we came out, we performed, and Randy's there with us, and Randi says, why don't you tell them how you do this? And we got up there, we said, yep. It's a hoax. We've been fooling you for the last 4 years. And we said this at the Time Life Building. It was a major, huge thing. All the newspapers hit it, from New York Times. I mean, every international paper hit it as well. They were not answering their phone. They were waiting to hear from Mike and I. I called one of the scientists back, and like I said, I have the tape. And I said, well, what do you, he said, we've heard this thing that you're working with Randi to try to fooling us all these years. And I said, well, what do you think? And they said, well, I don't think it can be true. And I said, unfortunately, it is. And then he just starts asking all these questions about every single experiment, just looking for one thing that he could hold on to that might be genuine.
So it was a desire to believe.
It was a desire to believe, absolutely, 100% desire to believe.
Does he still think that it was true, or does he?
You know what? I actually saw Peter Phillips give a lecture on Project Alpha. Somebody invited him. I wasn't supposed to be there originally, but I ended up showing up. And it's really interesting because Peter Phillips supposedly, he says, not supposedly, and I believe him on this, he said he was reluctant to actually be the person testing, but he was the only one that had an interest in parapsychology, so he was chosen by Washington University in St. Louis to run the Mac Lab, which is the laboratory that tested us. I think he doesn't believe that we were true, I don't think so, but he still believes in parapsychology, he believes in that type of stuff. He said in this thing, he started the whole lecture, he said that the reason he got started was because there was a man that levitated a small table, and he knows that it was real. But when we were working with him, there was a man that also levitated a table, and we tried to show him a photograph of the guy putting his thumb under the table and lifting it up. So we were actually trying to expose this other psychic that was there, because we didn't want anything to do with him, because it was very crude in his methods. And he refused to listen. He basically wanted to believe that guy was genuine as well. So, yeah, he definitely believes in paranormal abilities still. He just thinks that and he said it himself, we were very good at what we did.
What percentage of parapsychologists do you think are just genuine believers and who are really seeking the truth? Or do you think that some of them are just like doing it for attention or for money or something?
I think that I couldn't give you percentages, but if I was to guess, I'd say at least 90% believe that it's real. I mean, you start doing something and you're not getting any results, you kind of go in another direction at some point, right? Unless you believe there is something there, you keep searching for it. So I think that most of these people just, they do believe that it's real.
And there's a certain amount of loss aversion too, where you think I've spent so much of my life, or I've spent so many hours or so many months really looking into this and pouring my everything into it, believing it, looking for evidence. I found something that seems true. Like I don't want to lose that. I don't want to, feel like I've wasted my life or wasted my time.
Yeah, there is always that. I mean, we have that in our personal lives, right? We stay in relationships much longer than we should sometimes, simply because we've invested so much time and energy, even if it's a bad relationship. And I think it's probably the same thing with parapsychology or any of those areas that we go into in our life where we start working on something. We've invested so much time. Why give it up? Why go do something different?
Banachek, break up with Woo. So after that, how long was it after that before you started working with Randi with the $1 Million Challenge and with testing paranormal and supernatural claims?
Yeah, the $1 Million Challenge came much later. And I think it was Randi was doing most of the testing. And I think there came a point where Randi just didn't have the time to do it as much anymore, or the energy to do it. And he was doing other things and other projects. And they brought me in and asked me if I wanted to be the director of the $1 Million Challenge. And who's going to say no to that? So,
what did you do between the
I'm a performer. I perform.
So you were performing full time?
I performed even back in the days when I was working Project Alpha. I started performing back in those days, yeah.
Strictly mentalism, or do you do sleight of hand and stuff as well?
I can't do sleight of hand. I do magic, but I started out, I'm actually one of the only mentalists that I know of that started out doing mentalism. And when I started out doing mentalism, I didn't know there was a subset of magic called mentalism. I just knew that there were guys that con people using tricks. That's
what is mentalism for our listeners who?
Mentalism is a simulation of psychic phenomena using trickery. Well, that can be sort of redundant, right? But we admit that it's trickery. We take our 5 known senses to create the illusion of a 6th sense. We get on stage and we get up there and we're using magic. We're using magic, and maybe the magic's a form of psychology or verbal, nonverbal communication, or just straight up sleight of hand or some other form of trickery. We're using it to simulate psychic phenomena.
So when you say magic, you're not talking about Hogwarts. You're talking about doing things that just when people are looking one way, you go the other.
Yeah, Siegfried and Roy did tricks with lions and tigers. Chris Angel and David Copperfield do tricks with beautiful women. I do tricks with information.
Do you ever do, I know some performers do massive feats of memory. They'll memorize massive amounts of information, right, and then they'll use that, to whether it's counting cards or something like that. Like, do you ever implement that into your tricks? Do you use mnemonics at all?
I use a lot of mnemonics. I'm dyslexic, so I have issues with memorizing certain things, and I come up with little clever ways of memorizing things. Even my name is sort of a bit of a mnemonic for back in the day. Almost everything about me somehow has some sort of psychological aspect. In my early days, you mentioned Stephen Shaw. Nobody really knows that name anymore unless you go and dig back into my past and take a look. But I was doing a lot of shows, and I did a corporate gig one time, and the CEO got up there, and I was very young, so I couldn't say, hey, just read it the way it is, or and I also didn't have a cassette or anything that had my introduction on it. It was written. And he says, oh, I don't want to memorize this. He says, I'm just going to talk about you. I know a lot about you, and I'm going to get up there. And he got up there, and he said, oh, I've been on the Today Show, CNN Live. He's done this, he's done that. Please welcome Stephen. What was the last name again? I was like, oh, great. Next show, very next show, same thing. CEO wants to introduce me. He wants to give his own introduction. I said, yeah, the last guy forgot my name. It's Steve Shaw. Oh, yeah, Steve Shaw. I got it. No problem. Gets up there, does an introduction. Can't remember my name. Third guy, and I'm really emphasizing now that the last 2 guys forgot my name. Gets up there, does the exact same thing. Last name, couldn't remember it. Yeah, so he talks all about all these great things he's seen me do and how many times he's seen me and everything else. And I started thinking about it. Why can't they remember my name? And I realized it's a very common name, Steve and Shaw, very common names. No real hard syllables in there. There's a little, but not really. So I wanted something that was a mnemonic, because these were all older guys, something that they would remember, maybe even make fun of. And I wanted something that had at least 3 hard syllables in it. And I wanted it to be a one-person name, just one person name. And there used to be a TV show about an insurance detective called Banachek. It was spelled C-E-K, the Polish version of the spelling. the Czechoslovakian spelling. And I changed it slightly. I put Chek because I didn't want people trying to figure out how to pronounce it and, messing it up constantly. But I thought these older guys would remember the old TV show, right? So when it came time to actually introduce me, they've now got a hook. They've got something that they've hooked it onto, a mnemonic. It's a memory thing for them. And if they didn't know the TV show, they had to ask me how to pronounce it. And it's worked ever since.
What about for your shows when you're performing tricks? Are there aspects that you use with like memory techniques?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff I try to memorize ahead of time. I'll walk around, I'll look at people and things, and I've got to memorize certain things, so I associate them with different things, yeah. And to people that don't know what mnemonics are, mnemonics are sort of, it's a mental association. You create these associations. It's like, let's say a very simple version of that is 1 is gun, 2 is shoe, 3 is tree, 4 is floor. So if I want to memorize a loaf of bread, I imagine the gun shooting a hole in the loaf of bread. So every time I think of gun, I think of a loaf of bread blowing up, all right? 2 is shoe, I want to get a gallon of milk. I imagine myself pouring milk into the shoe. 3 is tree, I want to get peas, so I imagine big pea pods hanging from a tree, and 4 is floor, I might think of a can of peas, baked beans sitting on the floor. So now if I go 1 is gun, what is a gun blowing up? It's blowing up the bread, right? What's being poured into the shoe, which is number 2, that's the gallon of milk. 3 is tree, what's hanging from the tree? Pea pods, 4 is floor, what's on the middle of the floor? Baked beans all over the floor. So that's mnemonic, you associate that way. It gets much more complicated.
You can create like a location, like a memory palace, goes back to the ancient Greeks.
It goes way back to the Greeks when there was an earthquake and they couldn't remember who was at the table, but everybody sat in the exact same position at the table, and there was somebody that was there, so he could remember which seats were empty at the time, so he was able to tell you who was killed and who wasn't there. Yeah.
You read Moonwalking with Einstein?
No, I have not.
Josh Foer?
No.
He's a world memory champion. He's got TED Talks on this same type of thing, but it's amazing how little people really value memory techniques nowadays, now that you can just pull it all up on your smartphone and jot it down.
It is a thing you have to apply though, right? If I don't apply it, then I'm not getting use out of it. And you have to apply it and you have to do it consistently. Unfortunately, I don't do it consistently, but I do it consistently in my shows.
Coming a little bit further forward to the $1 Million Challenge. When you set up safeguards to protect from being fooled, to being taken in or fleeced,
It's not so much about safeguards from being fooled and fleeced, right? Because I don't look at these people as purposely trying to fleece me or fool me, because they could be self-deceived, and the majority of these people are self-deceived is the way it ends up turning out.
But you still need the caveats in place.
But I need to have those caveats in place. I've got to have the protocol in place, but it also has to be done in such a way, we talked about with Project Alpha, where they're comfortable. So it's got to be something that they're comfortable with. And here's the thing, right? The majority of the psychics, the majority of the claimants, the people that have these unusual claims, they are not comfortable with protocol. So it takes a long time to come up with a protocol that they're comfortable with, that they understand, yeah, we have to have protocol in place, but we're going to try and make you as comfortable as you can possibly be. And will your ability work within these confines? And if we cannot come to an agreement, then we can't test them, because it has to be done under proper scientific controls.
But you try to come up with a way to test it that's still a fair test.
A fair test for them,
that they're happy with. That they say, yes, I can perform under these conditions.
It has to be fair. Every time we test somebody, we have them state ahead of time, and we have them sign a piece of paper that says this is within the realm of their abilities, that it is a fair test.
Well, one example that I saw was you did a palm reader. You had a palm reader come in, and they had pictures of the hands, and they could see all the lines and everything, and they gave a reading based off of that.
And we put gloves on every person. The people were there, but we put gloves on the people so they couldn't see anything. And
so they couldn't tell whose hands. But the pictures, though, they were able to see the lines on the hands. But then they had to match the reading to
the individuals.
To the individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, they said they could do that. They said that will not be a problem. But the problem we find afterwards is when they fail, they always say, this is not what I normally do. Well, of course it's not what you normally do, because you don't normally work under proper scientific controls, right? There's no controls on what you're doing. She said, I need to have that interaction with the person. Well, that's exactly the problem, isn't it? Because the moment you get an interaction with those people, you are now getting feedback. And you're getting feedback that's a visual feedback. It's not so much a psychic feedback anymore. And that's what we're trying to say, is that you're often getting feedback from the person. You don't realize that's what you're doing, but that's what you're doing. We have to take that out of the equation.
Well, your subconscious is so much more powerful than we realize. Like not in a supernatural woo kind of way, but just in a sense of it's like a supercomputer, but the conscious part of it that you're aware of is only a very tip of the iceberg. There's a lot that you're taking in.
People ask me in my shows that they say, you know, how do you choose specific people? And I know there's some reasons I choose specific people. I choose people that are engaging. I choose people that may look a little bit like, you know, that may be a little attractive on stage for certain effects because it plays that. And then other people I choose for a different look, you know, for something else that might be in the show. So I know there are specific reasons I choose people. And a lot of it has just become instinctive from doing shows over the years. But there are times I bring somebody up and they, after the show, come up to me, you know, I saw you 4 years ago and you brought me up for that exact same thing. This happens a lot. So there are specific things that I am looking for that I don't even realize I'm looking for. And it might just be that that person is engaging, laughing, or whatever it may be. I don't know what it is, but it's my subconscious that's actually doing that for me at this point.
So it's not just like, oh, I was wearing a red shirt, so I stood out, because it's like years later they're wearing something else, and they're...
That's exactly right. Yeah. Unless they were wearing the same red shirt.
The same red shirt.
Yeah, which I doubt.
I haven't been shopping in 4 years. Penn and Teller have a show called Fool Us, and sometimes people have a new trick or a new technique of doing something that will stump some magicians who've been doing it for years.
I have a very good friend that's fooled them multiple times. Yeah.
If that's the case, have you ever worried that you would be fooled with the $1 Million Challenge? Or is it because Penn and Teller don't have the caveats, they don't have the safeguards?
In this day and age, it's more and more likely we could be fooled, right? I mean, with the electronics and the things and the technology that's coming out, it makes it much, much more difficult than it used to be to test people.
So you have to do like a test inside a Faraday cage or something to get rid of all external radio signals.
But there might be something else that's going on, right? It's just there's just tech is just advancing so fast that it really makes it hard sometimes for some of these things, and we got to find simple ways to simplify things, to make it as simple as possible. And we have to search people now. We have to, that all has to be part of the protocol. I've been worried. There's been a couple of times I've been worried. There was one experiment that I couldn't be at. I don't want to say too much about it, but it was set up in such a way that I looked at it and I went, uh-oh. When I showed up finally, and it was too late at that point because it was already into the experiment, I went, uh-oh, there is one way they could cheat with this. Wait a minute, there's two ways they could cheat with this. And thank goodness that person really believed they had an ability and they weren't trying to cheat. But if they wanted to cheat, they could have.
Don't you have several rounds? Like if they pass the first one, then you move on to the next?
Exactly, yeah. And I put that in place because if I was able to find out that there was some little loophole that would have enabled them, whether it's statistically, whether it's visual, whatever it might be, that I could fix that in the next round. And that's only fair to them and fair to us as well, because we're looking for somebody who has a true psychic ability, right? So if they say they have a true psychic ability, they certainly don't want people to say, yeah, but you could have been doing X, Y, Z, because that's really not fair to them as well. And it's certainly not fair to us who have the prize. Now, here's the thing, right? It's $1 million prize. Stats usually, whenever it's something that can be done statistically, is 1 in a million. When you put both tests together, when you put the preliminary, which nobody passed, and the formal test together, we usually try to get it around about 1 in a million. People do win the lottery. It happens. So there is a possibility that they could just pass by luck alone, the preliminary and the formal test, because it's 1 in a million adding them together. So if they pass out tests, it doesn't mean they're psychic. Just like if they don't pass, it doesn't mean they're not. It might be indicative they're not. Maybe if they pass, it might be indicative that they are, but it would take other scientists and other research and other tests to find out whether they were a genuine psychic. Just because they pass out tests, they can't go around saying, yeah, I'm a real psychic. Now you have to take it into other laboratories, and people have to replicate that research.
Well, exactly, and that's why oftentimes you'll have parapsychologists that will get a positive result, but then as soon as it goes to other labs and they try to test it and replicate it, it falls through.
It falls through, and a lot of times we find out that maybe there was one little error or something that they weren't thinking about when they were actually conducting the tests, and we find that out time and time again.
So you're not worried that someone, or I guess you are worried that with technology people might come up with something, but
we don't have.
You have enough safeguards that.
Yeah, we sometimes it has to be within an environment that we need it to be in. We had somebody that said that if EVPs, electronic voice, from spirits, they could put a tape recorder down and it would pick up the spirits, but they wanted to do it at a specific location, a specific place. And we, of course, we started thinking about, directional speakers and things and stuff like that. Are they going to be using something like that? Is there going to be something hidden in the ground? And we have to take all those things. So yeah, we couldn't do it where they wanted us to do it. And that became, oh, this isn't fair. Yeah, you're putting these kind of rules on it, and I'm telling you I can do it at this particular place at this particular time. And so there are some things we just can't test under their conditions. We can't let them conduct the tests.
I've noticed that as I've been making videos on psychics, I've showcased some of your work and some of Randy's work and Dr. Ray Hyman and others. And I always get from whenever a psychic stumbles across it, they always respond with things like, oh, well, these people are liars. They're actually, psychics. They actually have abilities. Randy is a psychic and he's fooling people and lying. And invariably, when it comes to the $1 Million Challenge, they say it's unbeatable. That it's not a fair test, and it's not, that they're just trying to disprove this. And what would even be the incentive to do something like that? One, and two, are you setting out to disprove it, or are you setting out to know the truth? Like, would you like to know if there actually were?
Well, if there was a real paranormal thing, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Every time I would go into a test, I would put myself in the mindset of, I want to find somebody who's real. I hope this is a real person. But I wouldn't let that get in my way, and I wouldn't let my skepticism get in the way. I just let the science handle it itself. And the science will let me know whether this is real or whether it's not real. I'm not going to come in here with a negative attitude because many psychics will tell you that, well, if you come in with a negative attitude, that interferes with the test. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to come in as if I actually sort of think it might be possible. Now, after you do it X amount of times and after you keep looking for it, and you don't find it, you start thinking, maybe it's not out there, right? And after each time you do it, you can kind of figure out what's going on or how they're self-deceived. You sort of come to a conclusion that more than likely this stuff is not real.
I was talking to Ray Hyman earlier, and he said, when he used to do palm reading, he was initially skeptical, and then he started getting positive results. And he thought, hey, maybe there's something to this. And then he reversed the reading. He would tell them the opposite of what the traditional palm reading books would tell you you're supposed to say. And people would say that they're extremely spot on.
Yeah.
And that it's just people are making stuff fit. It's a very psychological
He actually
thing.
got better feedback by giving them the wrong reading than the actual right reading he was supposed to give them. Yeah. And that's what really convinced him.
But if someone like that can start off as a skeptic and then suddenly be like, oh, maybe there's something to this, for any listener who is like, oh, well, I think I know how everything works, and then they suddenly go out and see something that they can't explain, I want to encourage them that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a actual logical, natural explanation for it.
I've always said, it is this thing, right? I say this in a lot of interviews. I'll just tell you the story. I used to do a lot of high schools, and one of the things I would do is I would perform, and if you've seen me perform, I try to make it look like I'm genuinely psychic. It's got to have that feel to it. I don't say that I am, but it's got to have that feel to it. There's a thing called mental magic, and mental magic is where it looks like maybe it's trickery, but it's still entertaining and nobody knows how it's done. And then there's the way that I try to present it, which I want to look like I'm a psychic. How would a psychic present this? There wouldn't be all this crazy long process. Pick this, do that, add this number, do these things. It's not going to be that kind of thing. It's going to look like it's genuine. So when I would get done performing, I would ask the students, I said, how many of you think this is real? And most of the hands would go up. Then I'd say, how many of you think it's not real? 4 or 5 hands would go up. And I would ask each one of them. I would say, why do you think it's not real? Oh, because my dad told me it's not. Why do you think it's not real? I read an article that told me it wasn't. Why do you think it's not real? I saw a TV show a couple of days ago that said this stuff isn't real. And I would say, you're right. And they would get a big smile on their face. I say, but for the wrong reasons. I say, all these other kids just saw something that they couldn't explain. I understand why they may think it's real. But you're just telling me because somebody else told you that it's not, that's why you're saying it's not real. It's not real, but you're much better off saying, I don't know. Sometimes that's the smartest thing you can say is, I don't know, but you know what? I'm going to do some research. I'm going to go find some facts, and I'm going to really take a look at it from every single angle, and then I'm going to make a decision. But the sad thing is, even in school, in kindergarten, if a kid says, I don't know, everybody makes fun of them and says they're stupid. And sometimes saying I don't know is the smartest thing you can say.
And at the very least, I don't know yet.
Yes, I don't know yet. That's actually a little bit smarter than I just don't know, because it means you're not just going to go, Unless it's kind of like when you just say, I don't know, I guess, in the way that you just put it, it's kind of like saying, I don't care. Right?
I always say at the end of my show, I'm like, dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid. Like, don't just be, be open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brain falls out, as a common phrase in the movement. But I've just gone over time, but I had really wanted to ask you if I can keep you for 2 minutes longer.
Absolutely, yeah.
I really wanted to ask you about the $1 Million Challenge, why it was retired, and then I also heard a rumor that you're bringing it back.
Okay. So, what? My manager's looking at me.
Is this topic off limits? Is this something in the works that you want?
I'm going to have to dance around this a little bit, and then you and I can talk again someday. But I'll tell you why it was retired. Randy retired, so that was part of why it was retired. The other reason is the resources and the amount of resources that would go into trying to put protocol together for everybody and anybody that wanted to apply. We would spend more time, and I don't know how to say this in a very sensitive way because I always wanted to be sensitive and understanding. There are a lot of people out there who have some mental issues, and we would get a lot of those people applying. And so we would always have to handle those people with kid gloves. But I would literally spend, my manager, who is sitting here, I've mentioned him a couple of times during this conversation, but he hasn't been heard. He still deals with a lot of emails and stuff that I get that have nothing to do with the $1 Million Challenge. Just the fact that I'm a mentalist, that I get on stage and I do what I do. He deals with a lot of crazy, crazy emails. Back in the day when I was doing the $1 Million Challenge, I had death threats. Randy consistently had death threats. So we're dealing with a lot of people that have mental issues as well. And we have to sort out the people that have mental issues from the people that truly believe they have these abilities. I think if we reboot it, it's going to be a little bit more done with a laser, going after the things that we know we can go after, going after the psychics that are already out there, challenging them and getting those people. Maybe we will open it a few times a year, but not so much that we're spending all of our resources on stuff that's never going to happen, but rather than on things that actually can happen.
So you're saying target people like the Peter Popoffs of the world that are fleecing people. And
the John Edwards, the Van Praaghs. Now, maybe they won't take the challenge, just like Sylvia Brown said she was going to take it when she was alive, and she never did, so we put a countdown clock on her. But there are other people that are out there as well that aren't quite up at that level, that aren't making that kind of money, that they don't care about $1 million. So we can certainly target and go after those people, but I hate saying go after those people because it sounds like we're going after them to really disprove them or to do something bad, and that's not
just showing
our purpose.
What's really
but just
going
giving
on.
them a chance to show us that their abilities are genuine.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Is there anything that you would like to plug?
Our podcast, Banachek's Brain, which we talk about a little everything and a lot of fun things and things like what we've talked about here right now. You can find me online at Banachek. Just punch in Banachek. Any social media will come up for me, or Banachek at Banachek.com.
Fantastic. And to anyone too right now, definitely go check out everything that he just mentioned. I just did an interview with Banachek. You guys already watch my show, so go find that over there. And while you're there, subscribe to the show and listen to it. And it's going to be awesome. So
I got to say, you're an amazing man.
Really?
You really are. I mean, just talking to you earlier and doing the podcast with you, you truly are an amazing individual. Yeah.
That means a lot to me. Thank you. And that's coming from one of my heroes. So
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. After my interview with Banachek, he published an interview he did with me on his podcast, Banachek's Brain, and it was a huge honor and a lot of fun. I'm putting a link to it in the description below, and while you're over there, subscribe to his show. He has tons of extremely fascinating content, and you won't be disappointed. And if you like what I'm doing here with Holy Kool-Aid, fighting harmful pseudoscience and dogma by promoting science-based education, please like and share this video, and consider supporting my work on a per-episode basis over at patreon.com/holykoolaid. Even just $1 helps a lot. Thank you for your ongoing support.
I do not believe that Houdini can come back to me or to anyone after faithfully following through the 10-year Houdini compact, using every type, medium, and seance. It is now my personal and positive belief that spirit communication in any form is impossible.
Despite the James Randi Educational Foundation offering $1 million to anyone who can provide proof of the paranormal, there has been no empirical evidence put forth whatsoever that has stood up to scientific scrutiny for any supernatural claim. In spite of this, our brains seek out confirmation for supernatural claims, focus on the hits in a psychic reading, and somehow dismiss the medium's failures. So I've compiled some of the best psychic fails in this video to make them easier to spot. Enjoy!
So is the housing market going to now get stronger?
Yeah, it will. It certainly will.
This is an extraordinary period for America's economy.
Lehman Brothers will file for bankruptcy this evening.
AIG, the world's largest insurer, facing potential ratings downgrades. It too teetering tonight.
Look, I'm the first one to say what I do is crazy. You have 3 children.
I have 2 children.
And you had a miscarriage?
No, I didn't have a miscarriage.
One of them is a really good writer, or he wrote like a good essay or something.
Well,
phenomenal.
Maybe that's going to happen in the future.
Yeah,
He's a horrible student.
Jane claims that she can reveal key personality traits about our 3 mystery celebrities just by holding objects that belong to them, including a watch, a flower, and a croissant. The first object.
This is a watch, obviously.
A career? What sort of career?
Career-wise, I'm going to say either
anything.
writing, creative. So she's somebody, either she's got a book or it feels almost feeling of writing. She's passionate.
You know it's a her?
Yep, it's a
lady's
feminine watch.
It's a man!
Do you have somebody, family, that is a J or an M?
A J and an M? Really? You went with the most common guy's initial and the most common girl's initial? I'd be more impressed if you went with a Q and an X. Funny, I'm getting a B and an S.
Duh.
Oh, yeah.
M, is it a male or female M? I don't know.
You don't know? Then what's the point of being psychic?
Is that your mom?
That's my daughter.
Is there another Mary or Marie deceased or middle name like this from your husband's side?
No.
Does she have a boyfriend?
She's only 6.
She's only 6. Okay.
We wanted to know if there was a young boy that passed in the family.
No.
Right.
No, there isn't.
August the 3rd, does that have a meaning? Is that connected to that grandmother? I mean, it's a big thing, a big ask, Christine, because you haven't even been thinking of that.
No, August the 3rd doesn't ring a bell at all.
Who is James on that side as well?
James?
Yeah, or someone I do might have been known as Jim or Jimmy, I don't know.
No.
Because
we are seeing various terrorist attacks on federal buildings. Particularly South Carolina or Georgia.
Really?
By July 2002. And also the New York Trade Center, the World Trade Center in 2002.
What I try to ask is, whoever is gone, will you please just show me which envelope they're sort of contained in?
You believe that's a dead person? That is a living person.
Attempt 2.
This one is a live person.
He was supposed to find Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley.
We know he's dead, right?
Absolutely. I'm considered very good at what I do, and boy, am I bombing.
Flawless victory.
My daughter, Michelle, was 17 years old. Sylvia, I don't know how she died. Please, if you can, how did she die? She was shot.
Circumstances around her death?
She just collapsed in her room.
I lost my boyfriend tragically a few years ago. They never found him.
The reason why you didn't find him is because he's in water. You can't find somebody.
Well, it was September 11th. There was no, he was a fireman.
Is there any way he could have drowned in water some way?
They never found a piece of him. Nothing.
In 2005 on the show Most Haunted, parapsychologist Dr. Kieran O'Keefe fed psychic Derek Okora the name of the ghost Creed Kafer. After Derek pretended to be possessed on the show by that ghost...
Is he telling you something, Derek? Is Sam giving you a name?
Creed! The name Creed Kafer was revealed to be an anagram for Derek Faker.
There are people right now that are like watching this going like, what? He's crazy. She's making me feel like when she passes either around or on a governmental holiday, or something that would be celebratory, but for the country. We're talking about like either July...
September 11th.
Was he killed? Just yes or no, as best as you can.
No.
Cancer?
No.
I'm saying this to you, John Edward. You are a liar, you are a fake, and you are the biggest douche ever.
There's also something with the back, so I don't know if she sees us sit and have a pillow with the back of her, or is that you?
No.
And what about trouble with legs?
No.
You not walk as well as you used to.
Oh no, he walks very well.
Okay.
Have you come here to try and communicate and bring this child through?
No, not the child.
She keeps talking about a separation here, a divorce, or there was some type of split up going back quite a while.
No.
Alors, Jean-Fabien, vous êtes voyant, n'est-ce pas?
Exactement, je prévois l'avenir.
Et celle-là? Hein? Tu l'as prévue, celle-là?
Okay, why she mentioned 17 years ago then? Is the Jimmy or James connected?
No.
She's saying yes on grandfather's side?
No.
Now, I'm also aware of a lady coming through as well. I'm pretty sure is that it was connected to a mum. Would she have been one of 5?
Yes.
Yes. I feel it's connected to the 5 which was connected to your mum when she said it was one of 5. I've got the power! And she said 5 of them. Mm-hmm. So you would know that was your mother coming through.
Think about it now afterwards. Sorry, it was 6.
Oh, it was 6?
Yeah. I said a quick count on my fingers, and I thought 5, then including my mum, would have been 6.
So she was one of 6, not one of 5?
No, one of 6, yeah.
The police told us there is no recorded instance of psychics solving a criminal case or providing evidence or information which led directly to its solution.
If you see a psychic show, just put a sticker on it that says cancelled due to unforeseen circumstances.
He said there was an old lady recently and she'd been diagnosed with terminal cancer. It was inoperable and she knew she was going to die soon, and I was sat there and she took my hand and she burst into tears. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I've been so stupid. My entire life I've worked so hard to save some money to leave to my children, and now I've gone and wasted it all on these people. And she was talking about mediums. She'd realised that it was a con, it was a scam. And he said, as she said this, she started crying, I started crying, and she died in my arms.
In this whole series that I've done on psychics, I've gone through and systematically exposed these goofs for the hacks they are, outlining exactly what tricks they use to con people by the millions. Despite knowing that it's absolute crap, you would be amazed how many people say, it's all just a bit of fun, what's the harm? What's the harm? These piranhas prey on the most vulnerable people in our society, conning the bereaved out of their life savings.
It turns out that self-proclaimed psychics frequently target the elderly and financially desperate all over the world.
My mother was 80 years old and suffering with onset Alzheimer's. I came across checks that she was writing weekly in the amount of $59 each time. And then I found checks that she'd written even twice a week and twice a day. And all of these checks added up to over $2,400 in the span of a year.
What was this like for you to see someone take advantage of your mom like this?
Oh, it was so painful.
What's the harm? What's the harm in turning those who need our sympathy most into your target? Under what circumstances is it okay to con a grieving widow? And when your mark opens up to you and bears their open wounds in front of you, what's the harm in pissing on the memories of their lost loved ones? Smearing it in bullshit to elevate your status as a guru, just to siphon money out of their wallet into yours? What's the harm in wasting police resources, in lying to cops and feeding them spiritual hogwash that, in the worst cases, can lead to life-ruining false arrests, and at best, is an utter waste of limited resources on a wild goose chase? Resources that could be spent productively, saving lives and solving crime. What's the harm in spreading pseudoscientific madness, sowing seeds of confusion and distrust against actual scientists who are testing theories and pushing society forward with results that work?
Everything I tell people is positive and gives them hope. How does that make me a douche?
Because the big questions in life are tough. Why are we here? Where are we from? Where are we going? But if people believe in asshole douchey liars like you, we're never gonna find the real answer to those questions. You aren't just lying, you're slowing down the progress of all mankind. You douche.
Psychics thrive off of a monopoly on mystery, intentionally misleading the masses with deep-sounding vague BS about quantum healing, energy crystals, and chakra alignment endorsed by naturopathic quacks. It's junk science. And the only thing it has in common with real science is that it sounds complicated. But science sets out to explain while psychics set out to mislead. Because when lying is your business model, obfuscation becomes strategy. They hold society back. We could be on Mars, and instead we're sitting around pretending to conjure dead people. It's backwards and it's sick. They say it's therapeutic, but we have people for that. They're called therapists, and they help you face reality, not hide from it. Psychics don't give closure. These slimy leeches dangle strings of false hope for desperate people to grasp at before draining their wallets dry.
Someone got in touch and said, there's a friend of mine who's very intelligent. He doesn't believe in psychic stuff generally, but his wife died. She was only 40, came out of the blue. She died, he was distraught. And so what you do is you clutch at straws. What can you do? You know, you can't bring them back, but if there's a slight chance you may be able to speak to them, you spend your money via a medium. So he did that, and the medium said, don't worry, everything will be fine. She's in heaven now, the pain's gone, and she's just waiting for you to join her. And the next week, he committed suicide to be with her. So that's the harm it can do.
If you drip feed false hope, you stifle the healing process. What's the harm? What's the harm in telling otherwise sweet but gullible people that they can fight an opponent using telekinesis, only to have them get their faces smashed in? What's the harm in telling desperate, chronically ill people that they don't need life-saving medical treatment, but that you can heal them with psychic surgery and energy healing that's really just a sleight of hand trick palming chicken guts?
People do this, they go to the Philippines, they spend their money, and they frankly return home, in most cases, to die.
Detectives say Wilson is quite the manipulator and somehow convinced the veteran to stop taking his PTSD medication and to keep their sessions secret. According to an affidavit, Wilson promised to bring the man out of the darkness. That vet paid Wilson $92,000 over the course of 15 months before he realized something wasn't right.
It's not that these cowards couldn't make an honest living using the same skill set. Magicians and mentalists use the same tricks to entertain, but they honestly fess up about the trickery aspect. The lie is the harm, and it's all a lie. But together we're pushing back against the harm done by promoting scientific skepticism and exposing their shtick. When it comes to telekinesis, also known as psychokinesis, there's a plethora of tricks that magicians use to give the illusion that they're moving objects with their minds. From magnets to static electricity to invisible thread, or even simple sleight of hand.
Soup's on.
But what about the self-proclaimed psychics who don't admit to using magic tricks? The ones claiming that it's all real.
What I do is real.
Unfortunately, there can be legal shenanigans resulting from outright calling particular hucksters liars, so I'm just randomly gonna play this YouTube clip for no apparent reason.
Why the you lying? Why you always lying?
While supernatural and psychic claims date back to antiquity, the history of psychokinesis, or PK, really took off in the 1800s. With the invention of photography and the widespread distribution of photographic hoaxes via newspaper, charlatans began popping up left and right, and simultaneously, skeptic debunkers emerged, swatting them down one by one. During the Cold War, people were losing their britches over the commies' military capabilities, so you can imagine how the public fascination with PK exploded from the media stir over the Soviet military investigating psychic warfare. First and foremost among the alleged psychics was Nina Kulagina, who claimed to be able to move objects with her mind, even objects inside closed containers.
We have found the witch, might we burn her?
And while numerous magicians have been able to physically replicate her feats,
this can be performed by means of a fine, invisible thread connected to her costume.
Unfortunately, she died in 1990, and because she lived in the Soviet Union, she was never properly tested under adequate scientific controls. And I'm sorry, but to anyone who thinks that the Soviet Union was a bastion of scientific standards, just Google Lysenkoism. Was any of this actually possible, though? Initial tests by British physicist Dr. John Taylor seemed to support the existence of telekinesis. He received positive test results of children bending spoons and paper clips. But after setting up a two-way mirror and secretly filming the test, he discovered that the little bastards were bending the objects by hand when they thought that no one was looking.
There is no spoon.
He's lying!
In the early 80s, James Heydrich was seen as the world's greatest practitioner of telekinesis, moving pencils, turning pages, and even rotating a psi wheel inside of a glass container, all without touching the objects. He was exposed on live TV by James Randi, and after the magician Danny Coram was able to naturally replicate all of his feats,
Coram discovered the gentle puffs of air directed at the table's surface will carry under the tank's edge and hit the dollar bill.
Heydrich eventually confessed to being a fraud.
Why did you feel that you had to tell them that you had powers that you didn't have?
Because I wanted attention. My parents would never give it to me. My whole idea behind this in the first place was to see how dumb America was, how dumb the world is.
Around the same time, psychokinetic spoon bending became a craze, with Uri Geller claiming that anyone could melt metal and bend spoons with their mind. He too was exposed multiple times.
Do you have an affinity, do you feel, with simple, shallow, depressed objects?
And eventually the Skeptic Society was able to get their hands on some cutlery allegedly bent psychokinetically and examined it in a lab.
With further magnification, it was possible to analyze the metal's grain structure.
This is a classic pattern produced by the grains when a metal has been mechanically bent.
On the other hand, this is the grain pattern of a spoon that was bent with heat. The differences in the two patterns shows our spoon was bent with a mechanical force.
If all of this isn't convincing enough, there's another reason to believe that telekinesis is nothing more than a giant sham. The laws of physics themselves. Science is the studying and testing of how the world works, and there's a reason that most scientists don't gobble up this tomfoolery. There are 4 basic forces in the universe that affect matter. The strong and weak forces only affect the world of the super small. They just don't have the range to affect anything larger than an atom. And that leaves us with gravity and electromagnetism. To paraphrase physicist Sean Carroll, an electromagnetic field powerful enough to move a distant spoon would be laughably easy to detect. And our brains just aren't physically constructed to generate or focus such fields. He wrote a great article about it for Discover magazine and also breaks down why there's pretty good reason to believe that psychics aren't tapping into some unknown 5th force. I'll link to it below. And as for gravity, you'd have to have a freaking huge head to have a gravitational pull that strong, and it wouldn't just tug on the spoon.
Disqualified!
But then again, some of these psychics do have pretty big heads. Brainwaves just aren't physically strong enough, nor do they have the range to move objects at a distance. You can, however, connect wires to the brain, allowing you to control robotic hands. It's not telekinesis, but it's probably the closest to it, and blatantly shows how science, once again, is our best shot at accomplishing the medical miracles that superstition and pseudoscientific fakery can only ever dream of. When they're not researching people on the internet to perform a hot read on someone, those claiming to be psychics love to edit out or gloss over all of their failed predictions and pass their lucky guesses off as paranormal powers. They usually get away with it too, managing to fool 41% of Americans into believing that psychic powers exist. They know that most people won't take the time to go and fact check them. And that's where I come in. I'm here to show you the bigger picture. The psychic cringe fails. Enjoy.
She is a nationally known Chicago psychic who has a unique way of seeing the future through coffee.
I pour regular coffee into a cup, and then I'm able to see, when I pour cream into it, I'm able to see letters, numbers, body parts, faces.
That's called your reflection.
Everything in the coffee.
Bullshit. You're talking bullshit.
I used to drink 30 to 40 cups of coffee a day. Prince William?
Prince William.
And Kate?
Yeah.
I've been saying this for a while, but I really see
you
twins.
Said it. Okay, we want to point last year or the year before when they got married. The year they got married, you said that.
She did say twins. We have it on tape. The year that they got married. So that would be really strange if that did.
Well, they're saying that's the reason why she has such bad
the morning sickness.
Morning sickness right now.
So, how'd she do? The royal couple had announced their pregnancy almost a month before this prediction and gave birth to not twins, but they got pregnant again, and 2 years later gave birth to not twins. But they got pregnant again and gave birth to not twins.
Oopsie daisy.
We decided to put the celebrity medium to the test. We asked her to meet us at the most haunted spot in New York City.
Who wants to find an old haunted village?
I'll tell you what I heard. It could be your mother saying this. I have to wait a minute or two. You have Uncle Jimmy? Uncle James?
No.
I say yes.
She got many things wrong, like what my children look like.
I just see one thinner and one is regular or a little maybe heftier. I'm looking at body type.
Both are pretty fit. Personal details,
You didn't lose a baby?
No.
Like a miscarriage or something?
No.
All right.
But sometimes she got close.
Do you have one sister? Mm-hmm. Is her name like Sheila or I keep hearing Sha.
Her name is Sandra.
Meh. M-E-H. Meh. Your mother, is it true that she helped raise somebody else's daughter?
Okay, sure, yes, true. She has another sister. What's the other sister's name?
Give me a minute, okay? Diane. Is it?
It is.
I was surprised that she got the names right.
That's what she said.
But on a hunch, I decided to Google myself, and there it was. My mom's obituary. In it, Aunt Diane's name, among other details.
Yeah. Are you wondering what your favorite celebrity will be up to in 2016? Well, we've enlisted the help of psychic medium Cindy Tryon to share what's in store for the stars this year. Let's start with Lady Gaga.
They show me that there's a marriage coming up for her, but there's somebody trying to put a roadblock, or there's some interference coming, is what they're telling me. But I see hands that are going to be very strong, united, and they're showing me that the marriage is going to go through, whatever the issues.
According to TMZ and People, Gaga and Taylor have officially ended their engagement after months of speculation that they were on the outs.
Edward Arthur Dames perfected remote viewing methods and techniques employing his technical remote viewing training, which guarantee his commercial clients an unprecedented 100% data accuracy rate.
We have an economic collapse a little over a year from now. Very quickly, we have deforestation, and we're looking at a barren earth. People are going to start moving underground and into habitats or strong structures, but food is going to be an extreme problem.
Do you know offhand how many of us get plowed under?
It looks like around 80%, possibly 85% nominally.
Grim, this is totally bleak. How much confidence do you have in this?
In the economic collapse and in the pathogen, 100%, or I wouldn't be talking about it on the show.
Is this irreversible?
It's out of our hands right now. This will begin about a little more than a year from now. We'll see this.
Boy, I didn't have a hint this one was coming, folks.
I feel fantastic and I'm still alive.
Believe it or not, despite having an abysmal prediction record, allegedly worse than Chance, Ed Dames is still predicting the end of the world any day now.
It's going to be a Mad Max scenario. That's what you're going to be confronted with. It is absolutely critical or you're going to die.
Fear-mongering to sell his remote viewing course.
Put your life back in your hands and obtain the information that may be the deciding factor for your survival.
Wait a minute, did that just say zombie apocalypse? It totally did.
To find out what my future holds, I'm booking appointments wired up with hidden cameras.
What is it saying about my relationships? Marriage, kids?
No, not marriage right now.
What I do see is that you haven't met your soulmate yet, but you will.
But it does show a relationship for you happening next year.
A relationship next year, but no marriage.
No marriage, not for right now.
Tell that to my wife. Sorry, honey.
It also shows me she has an accent. She's not American.
Remember, I'm already married. She's an American, and no, she doesn't have an accent.
And if you make her fit, I'll tell you how many kids you're going to have. 2.
I'm going to have 2 kids?
Yeah.
What are the sexes?
Well, it seems like you're having boys.
All boys.
That's it.
Nope, I have 2 daughters and 1 son.
Do you see kids for me?
I'm meant to have them, but not right now.
Whoops, wrong again. After we're done, I go back to properly introduce myself.
Hi again. I'm actually from NBC News, and we're doing a story about psychic readings.
Oh my God.
I didn't see that one coming. I didn't even see it coming.
I didn't see that one coming. You didn't see it coming.
I didn't see that coming.
I didn't see that coming.
I didn't see that coming. Oh my God.
Are these readings not accurate?
No, they aren't.
But I am married and I have kids.
I understand that. And sometimes within a reading, it'll pick up a past life.
That's not what you told me, though.
Yes. Listen, if you want your money back, I will give it back to you. If you don't, then you need to get out of my store.
Hi. The woman who just gave me the reading.
She stepped out.
She's coming back, or?
Not working.
So we come back later.
They've now put this metal gate in front of the door. It's still locked.
And even try a 3rd time.
No.
Everybody's talking about 3 weeks away from a new president, the year of Trump.
I know.
When is going to happen? There's a lot of opposition around him this year, and possibly impeachment within this year. Well, next year, when he. Yeah. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. In 2017.
Right, in 2017.
Yeah.
That soon. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
If I give you guys like a name of a YouTuber, do you feel anything?
Yeah,
And then if it's too
sure.
far, we'll cut it out. Let's start with PewDiePie.
Yeah, I feel like he's gonna. I also see him moving a little bit away from it too.
I do too. Within a couple years.
Yeah.
He's wanting to transition out of it eventually because I feel like he's kind of not hit a wall, but he's kind of hit the ceiling with what he can accomplish with it. And I feel like he's kind of wanting to do something different.
Okay.
So I think in a couple years he could transition into something else.
Whoa, holy moly! Oh wait, that's from an article before this reading. Here's what actually happened. It's been 4 years and PewDiePie is still putting out content at an insane rate. He went toe-to-toe with the entire nation of India, fighting a massive media conglomerate for his throne as the most subscribed to channel, quadrupling in size. And as I record this, he literally just broke 100 million subscribers.
He's kind of hit the ceiling with what he can accomplish with it.
Here, let me serve you bitch lasagna.
The person that passed with the overdose, what's the relationship specifically to you?
My father.
Your dad. Okay. Does he have a brother who's also passed?
No.
Yes, he does.
He only has a sister.
There's another male that's with your dad on the same level. There's a J or G connection to that family.
His wife.
Would be the J or G?
Yes.
Does she have the brother figure who's passed?
No.
There is a male contemporary to your dad on the same level. So if this is your father, you either have a father-in-law, an uncle, there's another male that's on that same level that's there.
Can't think of any.
Sure you do. I got all night.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
He has a sister.
Okay.
And
unless she has a penis, it's not her.
She only has, his wife only has sisters.
There's a male contemporary and there's a J or G connection that comes up. So if your dad's acknowledging the alcohol and or drugs or the consumption of how he got there,
right.
I'm telling you there's another male contemporary that he's got. Husband, brother, cousin, friend. It's on the same level that he would be on. There's a J or G connection that comes up with this.
No,
Yes.
nothing I can think of. Yeah. I'm just want to make sure that it's me that you're talking.
Well, that's my job, not yours.
Oh, okay.
You're fired.
A horse is a horse, of course, and no one can talk to a horse, of course.
So I'm a pet psychic.
Okay.
Can I talk to your horses?
Sure. Oh, honey.
When you tighten his girth at first, you're doing it too fast. He doesn't mind it tight because it's too fast. Did you ever notice that with him?
Oh, honey.
He says his hoof inside the front right is sore.
The sword?
Yeah. Does he feel lame to you at all?
Oh, honey.
What did you think about it?
Oh, well, that was good.
Yeah? Did you believe it?
Huh?
Did you believe it?
I would say that I'm skeptical.
How about you? You're like, you haven't sold me yet.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
There's still no sign this morning of a Malaysian Airlines jet that disappeared nearly 72 hours ago.
Sea or land?
I don't see it in the sea.
Okay.
I don't see it in the sea. I don't believe that it is in the water. I don't.
Malaysia's Prime Minister says investigators have a positive ID on the piece of plane wreckage that washed up on a tropical island off the coast of Africa.
This broken bit of airplane wreckage washed up on the French island of Reunion in the Indian Ocean.
When someone dies unexpectedly, they kind of remain earthbound, so they relive what happens to them. So they stay attached to that area, or they kind of stay attached to where they last were, because they're thinking, am I dead? I don't know. Because time and space collapses.
This guy is so full of crap that if he was Pinocchio, NASA would have commissioned his nose as scaffolding for a space elevator.
So whether it's 100 years or it's 10 years or 5 years or 5 days, time is an illusion for spirits, so it's all as one.
I saw a similar sort of theory written out on a wall, but it was written in shit. It was the roundings of someone you'd find by themselves in a hospital eating flies.
I really feel that that plane is intact, and I honest to God feel that not everyone is dead.
Were you very young when your dad passed?
No.
There's a young, well, what do you consider very young?
My dad just passed 2 years ago.
Okay. Who would
I'd like to think I was very young.
We've got my psychic bananas ready to predict your futures. We're going to go to our first call.
Will Wales win the football on Friday, says Erin.
And the answer is... that's the perfect yes.
That is...
Can you see the why?
Yeah, that is a big, big yes.
Well, I sure could be wrong here, but I get such a great sense for the White Sox this year.
The White Sox?
I really do.
Okay.
I really do.
The The White Sox were the second worst team in their entire league that year. You are literally a worse psychic than a banana.
You said that you predicted some health issues for Selena, but you're also predicting a pregnancy for her as well.
I am. A lot of pregnancies and splits in Hollywood this year coming up in the year 2014.
All around us are dishonest charlatans, boasting supernatural claims in order to bilk the credulous out of their hard-earned money. A psychic who's made millions by convincing grieving, vulnerable people she can talk with their dead loved ones. A faith healer who claims a direct connection with God before passing the offering plate to fund his private jet. And the list goes on and on and on. That's where my next guest comes in. He's a world-renowned magician who has dedicated his life to spreading scientific skepticism, exposing the secrets of psychics and debunking supernatural claims through TV and speaking appearances, documentaries, and books. His work has helped millions of people to avoid the snake oil and to think a little bit more skeptically. Without any further ado, I give you James the Amazing Randi. You, sir, were my earliest introduction to skepticism. By seeing your work, I was able to overcome a lot of my fear of the supernatural. How long would you say that you've identified as a skeptic?
I think since I was a little kid, I think about the age of 10, I was first sent to Sunday school, and they sent me back because I was asking too many questions. You know, who is this John? And who and what is Deuteronomy, or whatever this word is? They didn't appreciate that. They said he asks too many questions. He doesn't just listen to the Word of God in the Bible. And I decided that I had to look into this a little deeper.
Sounds very similar to my upbringing. I was the question kid. Now, you established the James Randi Educational Foundation, which had $1 million prize where anyone with a supernatural claim could win $1 million if they could verifiably prove it. I'm sure you've seen some crazy claims over the years, but which one would you say was the craziest?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say because they're of such different nature. Most of them can't actually state what they believe they can do. They can't make a simple, straightforward statement of, I can understand what number is in your mind, or something like that, you see. They say, oh, I get impressions about people, and I can tell them what's on their mind. Well, yeah, if I punch you in the nose, I think I know what's in your mind without too much trouble. But they just can't explain themselves. They think that they have all kinds of notions. But then when you see them undergoing what they believe are tests, they will do things like they say, okay, I get an impression about you that you have had a phone call recently. And the person says, well, not recently. It was a good week or so ago. Well, I meant that, about a week or so. But let's get more accurate, they'll say. Say something like, and this one involved the subject of money. And the person will say, no, not money. Actually, it was about an appointment we had. Was the appointment about money? No, it was just a case of a lawnmower that I loaned to him. Lawnmower, but they cost money, don't they? You see, they would go through things like this, trying to make it work, and beating around the bush and just using words that they had selected out of the conversation. They didn't know how they should test themselves. And at the end of a long thing like this for half an hour, they'd say, see the impressions that I got about you? But when you analyze it, they didn't get anything.
But a lot of people still seem to fall for stuff like that. What advice would you give to people in order to train them to be more skeptical of cold readers, psychics, and people like that?
Buy my books and read them. Or go to the library. That's the fair way to do it. Go to the library. Most of my books are in the library already. And sit and read them carefully. And my address is not too hard to find. Write to me. If you want to talk to me on the phone, I'm on the phone as well. Anytime you need advice or you would like to have some explanation of something like that, look me up and I'm available.
Careful, I don't want to flood you with phone calls.
Oh no, I don't mind it. Believe me, I don't mind it, because people who are inquiring to try to find out more information about themselves and about things they've been involved in, those are people that I really look forward to trying to help.
Now, I've noticed a lot of atheists within the magic community. There's you, Penn and Teller, Darren Brown, Matt Dillahunty, and many more. Do you think that there's a disproportionately large number of skeptics within the magic community?
I don't know about that, but I would say you could look at it the other way. that people who practice magic think about the world and about psychology and about physiology and various other things. They think about how the world really works. And because of that, they have to know how the world really works, or they can't do their magic. Now, they don't do magic. You're talking about the kind of thing we should really call conjuring, making the effect of a magician, doing tricks, things that look as if they are magic, but they're not really magic. And people who think that way and have an interest in that particular way of how people's minds work, those are the people who do most thinking about their own lives and about humanity in general and how it thinks.
Since you started conjuring and performing illusions, has that shaped the way that you think and the way that you view the world?
Well, when I see the effect by illusions, yes, it further shapes it, of course, because I have to know how people look at the world and how they perceive it from their sensory mechanisms, sight, hearing, touch, all of these things. I have to know that rather intimately so that I can misrepresent things to them in a way that they can accept and not be conscious of as trickery.
Let's say that you have a massive performance coming up, and you're about to get on stage before thousands of people in Las Vegas. The curtains open. You set foot on stage. What is going through James the Amazing Randi's mind?
I don't have a problem with that. I just step out, I say, hello, my name is James Randi, and I go from there. It's sort of natural. With people in show business, they don't have a problem each day facing an audience, because that's what they do. That's their livelihood, and it's their attitude. It's the way they approach the world. I think that more people should have that kind of attitude when meeting other folks, certainly for the first time. They should approach it with, I want to know more about this person, and try to evoke answers from them and opinions and whatnot. Encourage other people to speak, because in most cases they like to speak about themselves, and that will reveal a great deal.
Is it hard to find the balance between, on the one hand, you're on stage and you want to be yourself and relate and connect with the audience, and at the same time you're practicing an artful ruse, the art of deception and sleight of hand? How difficult is it to find the right balance between those two?
Well, it's something it's in my background already, and I've talked to other magicians about that exact same question. We just automatically fall into place. It's like falling into bed. You fall in a comfortable position, and if it's not comfortable, you move a bit until it's more comfortable. And finally, you can fall asleep. In other words, you can come to grips with your environment. It's a very natural thing, and it's hard to explain it step by step. But people have talked to me many times over the years about how they began to understand the world and how they affect the world by their reactions and actions in the world.
What do you think is the greatest threat to skepticism?
I think it's lack of education, and it's the way many of our school systems all around the world don't take the right approach to educating children. Education to children should consist of challenging them to answer questions and to find answers to other questions as well that are posed to them. But in many cases, it's just a case of repeating what has been written by persons wiser than the teachers in many cases. Now, that's good, too, because if the students can understand those words and they can read the great authorities and the great thinkers and understand it and really act on it, that's fine. But they should be challenged more. They should be challenged to find answers to questions that puzzle them. And teachers should encourage them to find answers. And maybe the teachers know the answers, but they should be encouraged to ask the student, what about so-and-so, just to start them into the search. Because students who find their own answers learn much more than answers that are presented to them by teachers.
Fostering curiosity rather than rote learning.
That's exactly correct.
What advice would you give to the next generation of skeptics and people who are starting to figure out how this world works and how to think critically? As you see them rising through the ranks, what advice would you give this next generation?
Two different things. First of all, technology is allowing us, through the use of computers and information systems, and everything from Wikipedia all the way down to the telephone directory. We have much more information available to us every day that passes. It gets better and better, but you've got to treat it with respect. There are some things out there that are planted in your mind or can be planted in your mind by information systems, by people who want to benefit from your ignorance and from your misdirection. So be very careful. Select your sources of information very carefully. Now that takes a certain amount of skill, but more than that, it takes experience. So you have to stay with it for quite some time.
And where can people go to find your work?
Most libraries. My books are in libraries. I have an 11th book coming out, and it's called A Magician in the Laboratory. It details how I have visited labs and places of higher knowledge all over the world for many years now and found out that in many cases, they just don't know what they're doing. I did a whole trip all the way through Europe and all the way to China and back, just visiting laboratories. That's what this latest, my 11th book, is about. And in many cases, they looked at me and said, you may be right, and they really thought about what I said. In other cases, they just smiled at me and said, oh yes, but we have our own ideas on how these things work. And they totally ignored me because I didn't have academic credentials to wave at them. They didn't know that I know as much as I do about how people's minds really work. And a magician or any performer is very apt to be able to give themselves a better picture of what they're all about rather than people who are going to read them out of books.
It's hands-on experience.
That's right.
What has been your favorite trick or performance on stage that you've ever done or that you do regularly?
That's hard to say, but I have an answer for it, which is probably true. The next one.
James Randi, ladies and gentlemen.
Operation Pizza Roll started in March in 2017, and it mainly started because the New York Times wanted to make sure that they got a hot read, because you can catch a cold read on a psychic pretty easily, and I've done it many, many times. Hot reads are really difficult to prove.
Psychics often claim that they can read people's minds, predict the future, or tap into the spirit world and communicate with the dead. It's a hugely profitable industry. But to convince people that they have access to special information, they rely on one of two methods. Cold reading, which is where you read the sitter cold, relying on verbal and nonverbal clues to glean information from them, sort of like Sherlock Holmes. And hot reading, which is where the psychics research the sitter ahead of time using tools like social media and either memorizes the details or has someone communicate it via an earpiece. I've done entire videos on the methods of both tactics and we'll put links to them below.
You can't just stand up in a psychic show and say, you're a fraud, you're phony. Does nothing. You cause a disturbance and you're thrown out. And that's it.
Thomas John is a world-renowned psychic whose clientele includes Jennifer Lopez, Julianne Moore, and Courtney Cox.
And a friend of mine in the LA area, she said, hey, this psychic just came across my Facebook feed. He's going to be in Hollywood in 2 weeks. You want to try to do something with this guy? And I'm like, sure. I'd never heard of him before.
People ask, do you ever have naysayers or skeptics? I mean, I do probably in the world, but those people really don't come to see me because they wouldn't, they're not going to come.
Right. He just happened to be the one that we got because he was in the right place at the right time, but I knew nothing about him beforehand.
I'm just more aware of somebody's energy, people around them, their aura, things like that.
When we decided that we were going to do Thomas John, we said, all right, who wants to be in the team? I just threw that out on Facebook and several people said, I do. I couldn't tell him who I was doing. I just told him it was a psychic. I said, it's going to take about 2 weeks. We're going to be lying to the psychic. We're going to give the psychic money, and it may possibly cause people in the audience to believe further. Because when we go to the event, we're not going to reveal ourselves as being skeptics. We're just going to look like one of the crowd and agree to everything that the psychic says. So I told the team, I said, if you're not okay with that, then you need to not be in my team.
And of course, everybody who got involved with it really went out of their way to make these pages real.
So I explained, you're going to create these pages and you're going to interact with each other for about 10 days. And during that 10 days, you're going to create a lot of different characters. 2 of the characters are going to go to the psychic event. One is going to be myself and one of them is going to be Mark Edward. I said, you are going to create a backstory that I won't know anything about and Mark won't know anything about. And then you just look like you're real people talking to each other.
The idea was to try and have something that was bulletproof, because a psychic could say, maybe I was just reading their mind, what they were thinking. I've worked with psychics for long enough to know they have an answer for everything. And unless you can choke them with their own bait, you're not going to get anywhere. So what we had to do is double blind it by making sure that some of the information that was put on the Facebook pages, Susan and I didn't know. So when we went to the show, we were only given a very limited amount of facts.
They put together a backstory for myself and for Mark. And they said that I'm Susanna Wilson, and I'm going to attend this event with my husband, Mark Wilson. I want to contact my dead twin brother, Andy, who died of pancreatic cancer a couple years before. And then Mark's story, they created saying that Mark didn't have a great relationship with his dad. And years ago, his father had died of heart problems. And now Mark's about the age his dad was at the time that he started having heart problems. So Mark's been really thinking about it a lot and having some tests done. So he wants to be in contact with his dad, and he's stressed out about these tests he's had. So we're only told that little bit of information.
The rest of it was filled out by dozens of details and photographs and pictures of cats and dogs. The idea was if the psychic took that bait, then that would show conclusively that they used a Facebook, because we didn't even know what he was talking about.
Now, we didn't know if Thomas John was going to hot read us or cold read us or ignore us. We didn't know. Mark is a very non-military kind of person. He's kind of a hippie.
I wore on my lapel, a Marine pin, right? Because sometimes it's cool to add a little extra bait on top of it, a little bacon on the hamburger, you know?
I'm, born and bred in America, and my relatives are from Slovenia. So I wore a thistle pin from Scotland on my jacket. So the idea was if he was going to cold read us, he would probably pick up on Mark being a military person, and that I would probably have a lot of ancestors in Scotland, because obviously I don't have a Scottish accent.
We got the ticket. 2 tickets, and we decided we were going to be husband and wife.
Oh, we wore wedding rings too, like we were married to each other, which we're not.
We each had a tissue so that we could dab our eyes, from time to time, and twist it nervously.
I purchased the VIP tickets, so we're in the very front of the audience. There's maybe 50 people in the room, and we're sitting in the 3rd row.
We walked in, we got in the 3rd row, and the host comes out and says, "Oh, by the way, feel free to record this whole show." And we're like, okay.
Thomas John comes out onto the stage holding a microphone, and he stayed in that position for 2 hours.
Usually I will close my eyes. I might go into a little bit of what I would call like a trance.
And he would close his eyes most of the time, like he's really concentrating on hearing something.
In the first 10 minutes, he had nothing but solid hits, which to me as a mentalist, I was like, something ain't right here. I kept looking at Susan like he was just nailing stuff. It was too much. You're like looking at this guy and you're saying, if he could do this, why doesn't he go to the racetrack? Or why doesn't he buy lotto numbers? Why does he have to stand up here at 8 o'clock on Friday night and do this? Just basic logic, right?
It was so spot on that we were really like, uh-huh. And Mark's like, yeah, that's a little too accurate.
But we later found out that the woman who he was so accurate with behind us had already had a reading from him. She came up to us after the show and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad he was able to reach through to your brother and your father. I was much happier than the last time I was in his show. He didn't get anything." So it's really hard for us not to say, but don't you, we have to stay in character. So we said, yeah, that's really tough. So you've seen him before? Oh, yes, he knows all about me. So remember, the rest of the audience does not know that. These people are so bereaved and so in shock, they won't say, wait a minute, you already told me that the last time, I was starting to look around the room a little bit, but I didn't want to look too suspicious. And there was a woman sitting across the aisle from me who was dabbing at her eyes. And I leaned forward and looked at her. She wasn't really crying. She was doing the same thing we were. So I knew that sooner rather than later, he was going to get over to her and they had something set up. So she was a plant, right? But see, the average sitter, the person who goes into these things, They don't think of that.
And she got a reading that was accurate, really, really accurate. And she's crying with the tissue. And Mark nudges me, he says, she's not crying. And we're like, okay. Then Thomas says, I'm getting a brother who wants to reach out to his twin. I tentatively raised my hand. I'm really nervous.
Who's Andy?
That's my brother.
That's your brother. I feel like you and Andy, you always kind of share this energy between you where you could kind of like hear each other's thoughts and things like that.
And I'm dabbing at my eyes and pretending I'm crying. And Mark's fanning me with paper because I'm like supposedly really hot and just really nervous.
Somebody's making me aware of cancer. Is this your brother? Did he have cancer? And I get in here, which to me would show me stomach or pancreas. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay.
Then he starts telling me about things that I have no knowledge of whatsoever. Who's Maria? Who's Buddy?
I also, he's bringing this up and he brought it up 3 times and he's like, Maria. Do you know who that is? Because he's bringing up Maria. And Buddy? Who's that?
We don't know what's on those Facebook pages. We just know that we're trying to agree with him on everything he says.
And that became a little interesting because we had to sit there and say, yes, and we didn't know what he was talking about.
So your dog is here. Must be your dog because there's a dog here.
And then he goes to Mark.
Your dad passed from heart problems. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Now, I don't want to scare you, but have you had your heart checked?
And he talks to Mark about heart disease and how he had some tests done and he's really worried about the tests and how there was a lot of distance between him and his father.
I do know that I can tell you with your dad, because this is what he's telling me, he wants to take ownership for the fact that he was pretty hard on you growing up.
Which is what we knew. And then he goes into other things like, who is Steve?
There's a gentleman in spirit coming through, Steve.
Who quit smoking?
Did he quit smoking?
Yes. Mark and I just had to kind of just go with it.
Is that true? Did he smoke and then quit?
Several.
No, your brother, the twin.
Oh, my brother?
Yes.
My brother did too.
Yeah, well, both of ours did.
No, but I think it's your twin. Did he quit smoking?
Yes.
Okay, so he quit smoking.
I thought it went really well. We were absolutely overjoyed when we compared the screenshots of because what we did is we got a transcript from the audio and we compared the screenshots of the Facebook pages with the transcripts from the audio. They're mirror images.
So one of the things Thomas John asked me was about Michigan.
Is there a connection at all to Michigan?
When I asked the pizza rollers, what's this with Michigan? They didn't know what I was talking about. And so one of the people in the group said, wait a minute. And she went to one of those filler pictures that they had just inserted, and it was for Cornwall Park. It's someplace in the UK. So we Googled the park name, the Cornwall Park, and it comes up to a park in Michigan. He says, who was smoking, and quit?
Somebody's talking about they were smoker, and they quit. I think it's your brother.
I asked the pizza rollers about that also, and they said, well, I don't know. Nobody put anything about smoking. And then they scrolled, and they saw that Andy, the account they were using as my brother's account, if you look far enough back, there's a screenshot where he had put one of those life events and he put quit smoking back in 2013. 15 people or so went into this back room to meet Thomas John. And he goes up to one woman and he takes the book from her. And it's the woman in green, the woman that he had given the reading to earlier that was perfect. And he takes the book and he gets his pen and she looks up and she says, spell it right this time. Really? Spell it right this time? And he said, okay. And he just kind of signed her book and handed it back. And everybody else in the room, he had to ask them their names.
We thought that was a little odd. And then Susan asked him, Susan says,
are there any other mediums that you have endorsed over the years? The people that you really look up to, your people that you think do a fabulous job? And he said, well, there's this medium and that medium, and their names I've never heard of. And then he said, some of my students have also showed great promise. And I said, oh, you have students? And he said,
one of my students is here in the room. That's her right here. And he points to the woman in green.
The person you gave a reading to in the audience was one of your students. How very interesting,
So we're like, yeah, he is training her and doing a pretty good job of it too, right? And we're looking around the room to see if anybody else noticed that. But why would they, right? They're all fawning over him like, oh, we think you're so great, but we're just going, oh man, he just called out his own stooge. right in front of us.
2019 will definitely be a year of, this is the year really of manifestation.
I mean, it's really fun to play the game of these charlatans, to beat them at their own game, or at least try to beat them, because we both know it's a world of lies and we have to start somewhere. I'm a magician and a mentalist, and I appreciate the artifice of what these guys do, but I can't stand the way that it tears people up. How disgusting can it be when a psychic says that someone's missing child is murdered and will never be found, and they turn up alive in Chicago? It's just, it's wrong. And, you know, for the people who give them platforms like the daytime TV shows, they are partly responsible.
After Operation Pizza Roll, the New York Times wanted to run the story, but the columnist for the exposé asked if he could trail along to another sting operation with a different psychic first. That became what would later be called Operation Peach Pit, and they were joined by the paranormal investigator and skeptic Kenny Biddle. Between the two operations, Thomas John was given his own TV show on Lifetime called The Seatbelt Psychic, where he would pick up alleged strangers in a rideshare and give them both a lift and a reading. And his accuracy seems pretty impressive at first, but after a bit of investigation, Susan discovered that the sitters being read were actually paid actors for the company that produced the show. She has an entire article about her findings, and I'll link to it in the description below. To anyone thinking that psychics are all just fun and games, they most certainly are not, and have conned people out of their life savings, wasted police resources, and cost others their mental health and sometimes even their lives. I have a whole video on what the harm is, and I'll link to it below. If you have a friend or family member who's fallen prey to one of these grief vampires, I have an entire series on my channel exposing psychics and the tricks that they use. Feel free to share it with people and call out these psychic vultures wherever you see them. Don't let them get away with this. I'm also going to put links below to Susan's articles, the New York Times story, and the full audio recordings for Operation Pizza Roll. And if you appreciate this video and the work that I do promoting skepticism and critical thinking, you can support my work on a per episode basis at patreon.com/holykoolaid. Lastly, after the Times article, Thomas John responded to the allegations in a live Facebook stream. So it's only fair that I give him the final word. Dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid.
I didn't go on anybody's Facebook profile. I would never do that. I'm not interested in doing that. I don't have the time to do that. It has nothing to do with anything. It's like the stupidest stuff. I mean, seriously.
These are the Psychic Twins. They claim that they predicted 9/11. They've written multiple books, made a plethora of media appearances, have over 750,000 YouTube subscribers, and have collaborated with some of the biggest YouTubers in the world. And today, we're gonna test their claims and see if they hold up under scrutiny, starting with their claim of predicting 9/11.
We're known for predicting world events like 9/11.
Every single time that I've seen them make this claim, they cite their appearance with Art Bell on Coast to Coast Radio and nothing more.
Back in 1999, November 2nd, the legendary Art Bell of Coast to Coast AM radio said, you know what, let's have some fun. Y2K is coming up. And I think it'd be fun if you came on our show and did some world predictions for, Y2K in the upcoming millennium. We predicted 9/11 on that show.
We are seeing various terrorist attacks on federal government. And also the New York Trade Center, the World Trade Center.
So I tracked down the unedited full version of that show, and I'll link to it below and put a timestamp.
We are seeing various terrorist attacks on federal government, federal buildings. Yeah, particularly South Carolina or Georgia.
Really?
By July 2002. And also the New York Trade Center, the World Trade Center in 2002.
Really?
With a terrorist attack.
Wait a minute. They didn't even mention Osama bin Laden, airplanes, or the Pentagon. Not only that, but there were no terrorist attacks whatsoever in South Carolina or Georgia, especially not against federal government buildings. And they didn't predict the day, month, or even the freaking year right. By 2002, there was no World Trade Center. So, no.
We predicted 9/11 on that show.
That is literally wrong. Now, New York, and specifically the World Trade Center, was already one of the biggest terrorist targets in the world and had already been bombed in 1993, so it wasn't a crazy unlikely prediction, especially with the vague facts that they gave. If this is their best prediction, which I'm guessing that it is because it's the one that they highlight the most, then I'm very unimpressed. But I went ahead and listened to the rest of their predictions on that show to get a better idea of their success rate.
We also see very positive things like an AIDS cure in 2002 and a cancer cure, especially for breast cancer by 2007, for example, a breast cancer drug breakthrough in 2003. We do feel that communication with UFOs is going to step up greatly within the next 7 years. So it'll be almost commonplace. No, definitely.
There will be a great deal of ET contact in the year 2012, we're feeling. A great deal of communication at that point.
It's been 20 years since they made that prediction, and we haven't even stormed Area 51 yet.
We are seeing all kinds of things in terms of cures for MS and cerebral palsy and muscular dystrophy and things that used to have no cure, spinal cord injury. We see a great progress being made within the next decade.
I was just up at the Somewhere in Time reunion. Christopher Reeves was one of the stars of that Somewhere in Time movie. He is hopeful that in his lifetime, and not very far into the future, there is going to be a cure, and he's going to get up and walk.
I think he will walk, but I think he'll still need to be aided.
Unfortunately, Christopher Reeve died in 2004 and never regained the ability to walk. Rest in peace, Superman.
We did see a race riot in Tennessee in the year 2001.
What do you think about the Egyptian pyramids and what they actually meant?
Oh, wow. That's pretty deep.
Yes, it is.
They were supposedly built by Lyrans, I believe.
Extraterrestrial in part. I mean, guided it.
Am I the only one who finds it ironic that these are the same ladies who wrote the book You Can't Fix Stupid?
I really don't think there are any new illnesses. I think that everything has been around forever and it just kind of keeps popping up in different forms.
Oh my god, do you girls even have a high school level science education? Now, I could go on, but to save you time, I'll summarize the rest of their predictions. If you want to listen to the whole thing, I'll put a link to it below. They predicted school shootings on specific dates in Washington, Houston, Detroit, Tennessee, Alabama, Boston, and Omaha, none of which happened. Stock market crashes in 2004, 2005, and in May of 2000 due to planetary alignment, because that's how the stock market works, none of which happened, and that Quebec would separate from Canada by the end of 2000. And then they have a bunch of predictions like, we'll have time travel in the next 300 years, the Antichrist will return in 2084 in 6 bodies, and we'll have a two-way voice communication with the astral realm, allowing murder victims to chat about their killer by 2030. They did successfully predict Bush winning the election the next year, but in 1999, Gallup had already made that prediction. It was a pretty safe bet, but when they stuck with the odds again in 2016, Trump's surprise victory totally blindsided them.
Hillary Clinton will be elected president.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Oof.
So you guys had predicted that Hillary was going to win, which technically, I don't know if you were going to get
we saw her winning, yes.
Technically, she did. She got more votes.
I got 2 million votes. More than 2 million.
That's just not how it
and
works.
still counting.
Stop. Just stop.
It may not happen, guys. I could be completely wrong. There's a first time for everything.
Now, they claim that they have 3,000 documented successful predictions.
We've documented over 3,000 world predictions that have happened.
But as awful as their performance on Art Bell was, how on earth are they getting close to those numbers? Well, here's them on another long-form radio show called Beyond the Gate, giving a list of states where they saw potential terrorist attacks.
We're seeing, a possibility of an attack in New York City, East Coast being planned now. We're seeing D.C., Virginia, Colorado again, Georgia as well. We're seeing Michigan. I don't know if Terry mentioned California, but we're seeing California. No, I haven't yet. Portland, Oregon, Nevada. We wanted to mention North Carolina and South Carolina. We're seeing New Jersey, Arizona, Washington State being vulnerable for terror plots or mass shootings. Washington, D.C. as well. Missouri. Terry, we were both vibing on Texas again. Yes, when we talk about the mass shootings or attacks, these are not necessarily Al-Qaeda or terrorist related. No. Well, to me, anybody that's getting shot or any mass shooting is terrorism. I don't care if it's domestic or foreign. Absolutely.
You gotta be kidding. They literally just listed off 15 of the biggest, most populous states and said that they predict either terrorist activity or a shooting with one or more victim, including one or more potential shootings in Texas, a state known for having more guns total than any other state. Oh, but they're not done.
In Europe, we're seeing Germany, UK. I was feeling Germany, France, and England just today. They have a large Al-Qaeda community. Japan, I'm seeing Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, I think I mentioned Iraq, and Yemen. Yemen is the most dangerous. I'm seeing an increase in terror attacks in that area and northern Africa. Definitely. And even middle and eastern Africa. Yemen, Russia, India, seeing Egypt again in the news with increased unrest and political unrest throughout the Middle East.
This is the psychic equivalent of shooting a shotgun at the side of a barn and drawing small targets around where the buckshot landed to show how good of a shot you are.
I really see increasing massive cyber attacks and espionage on banking and finance, government and information systems, computer networks, and telecommunications in the U.S. could involve China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea this time. In the next couple of years, I'm seeing bank hack attacks throughout the next couple of years.
Now, I'm sure that they picked Iran, China, Russia, and North Korea because those are the most prominently known countries with state-sponsored cyber warfare divisions known for targeting the US, but they literally could have picked anywhere for this one. Because if you look at any major cyber attack map, you will see millions of cyber attacks originating and ending everywhere with an internet connection.
So much good news here on the medical front. We probably have the best reputation of anyone in terms of medical advances and breakthroughs over the last, dozen years or so. We're seeing breakthroughs in addiction, Parkinson's disease. We're also seeing breakthroughs for AIDS and HIV. David, as you know, we're the ones that had predicted the AIDS cures and breakthroughs that have happened over the last dozen years or so. Very exciting.
No! You're the ones who predicted an AIDS cure by 2002, remember?
We also see very positive things like an AIDS cure in 2002.
That was 17 years ago. Could you be any more dishonest? Also, they didn't predict an HIV breakthrough or treatment in 2002. They predicted a cure by then. And yes, they know the difference because on that exact same show, they made a very clear distinction between the two.
A breast cancer drug breakthrough in 2003 and a cancer cure, especially for breast cancer by 2007, for example.
That is so dishonest, but they're still not done.
We're seeing very big hurricanes, Cat 4 and 5 strength hurricanes, but on the east coast of our country as well as other countries. And it's going to be an active hurricane season this year with a major hurricane hitting the Gulf Coast.
Where else are they going to hit during hurricane season? The northern Pacific Ocean is too cold, and according to Slate, there's no record of a tropical hurricane ever hitting the West Coast.
There will be strong seismic activity in California, particularly Southern California, next year or two, and there's a high risk and strong likelihood for a major strong earthquake coming up, and it's inevitable, you guys.
Oh, that's amazing. Do people not know how earthquakes work? Like, do the people listening not realize that there are well-known geological reasons for why earthquakes occur by the thousands in California but never in Manitoba? They're called tectonic plates, and wherever there's a major subduction zone on a fault line, you get seismic activity.
We're not seeing a tsunami coming anytime soon, Christine. There is at least one tsunami warning, but not for the U.S. In another country, yes, we're seeing one being possible. We were getting Thailand or Indonesia. We were seeing Asian areas being more vulnerable to tsunamis than the U.S. You're going to hear a lot of people going, doom-mongers saying, there's a tsunami coming to the east coast of the U.S. this year, and we're just not seeing it. We're frankly not seeing a tsunami hitting our country anytime soon.
Again, thank you, Captain Obvious. The U.S. Geological Survey has literally released reports on why tsunamis on the East Coast are extremely unlikely.
We're seeing major killer tornadoes in the next 2 years. In Tornado Alley, particularly the Midwest, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama comes in, and Missouri even for twisters. So we're seeing F3, F4 being most likely, F2, and F3 or 4. I'm seeing a possibility of an F5.
Are they genuinely counting these as some of their 3,000 accurate predictions? Earthquakes in California, tornadoes in Oklahoma, and hurricanes on the East Coast?
We're seeing some celebrities going into rehab and possibly overdosing this year, and I pray that doesn't happen.
I just can't anymore.
We're even seeing a flying car that would use like superconducting super magnets. They already have magnetic trains. This car is going to be extremely costly, but we do see this happening over the next couple years, being absolutely able to be produced. It would float on like a magnetic cushion, and it's exciting. It's really in its infancy stages, but we've actually seen it happening, and I think over the next few years it's going to even be made available.
No, just no. That will literally never happen. First off, just to hover, we would have to retrofit every single road with a magnetic surface that repels the car. While we've done this with a few select train routes, to do this with every single road would be outrageously expensive and extremely impractical. And second, you would have to have an insanely powerful magnet to not just levitate, but fly. And if your car generated that kind of a magnetic field, every metal object below you would be flying around like crazy and every electronic device would be fried. You're pulling straight up garbage out of your collective butts. This is not just a possible future written in pencil, not etched in stone. No, this never was a possible future to begin with.
If I had a news station, I'd say, and now the weather with Terry and Linda Jameson.
Oh, yeah, we have some of the most major meteorologists are following us on Twitter now.
Oh, they're cheating.
They're cheating.
No, but at least they would get correct information out.
Or how about we keep relying on the most cutting edge modern science and don't take society 1,000 years backwards into the dark ages?
It used to be maybe thousands of years ago before the patriarchy took over and killed all the psychics and witches and tried to steal their power. And so we're still rebuilding like the validity of the work we do.
I'm sorry, but you can't even land a job as a seismologist, climatologist, or meteorologist if the best that you can do is predict that at some point in the next year, there will be tornadoes in Oklahoma and earthquakes in California. That's about as useful as telling people that they should buy a lottery ticket with the number 4 in it. If they genuinely had psychic powers, why don't they buy a lottery ticket or bet on horses? And no, you don't get to say that you're not doing this for the money when you charge $600 an hour for a private reading.
A lot of people ask, how much did it cost? Now, they gave me 2 options. It was $350 for 35 minutes, or it could have been $450 for 45 minutes. So either way, you're paying $10 a minute.
They claim on their website to be the fastest growing YouTube channel in history. I don't know when they put that up, but their social blade tells a different story, which is probably a good thing because what they're doing is genuinely harmful.
We've worked as psychic detectives helping police with murder cases, cold cases, missing persons cases. We've, channeled the dead. We do medical intuitive work, which is diagnosing illness for people. We diagnosed a 27-year-old. We told somebody to actually exhume a body, and she did it.
They claim to work as psychic detectives, literally saying who is and isn't guilty of unsolved murders. Rachel Oates has done a whole video on that, so I won't cover it in detail, and I'll link to hers. But can you imagine if you've just lost a loved one and you're innocent, but a massive celebrity psychic with zero evidence says that you're guilty? You're already going through the horrible pain of losing a loved one. Now couple that with a barrage of online hate, harassment, and accusations. The psychic twins are not only parasites in that regard who also profit off of massive tragedies like 9/11, but other stuff that they do is also fundamentally sick. Like when they claim to summon the dead spirit of JonBenet Ramsey.
So we're going to channel JonBenet. We're going to talk to her.
Okay, we're connecting with JonBenet Ramsey. We clothe ourselves in the white light of God and call on the angels to protect us from any harmful energy or negative energy. We connect with the spirit of JonBenet. Are you with us? Yes. Yes. I am here. Thank you for coming in and speaking with us today, JonBenet. We've been talking about your sad passing, and we've been talking with you a lot this week. Can you tell us what happened that night that you were killed? It was a shock. I was so surprised. I forgive Daddy and Mommy for what happened. I forgive everyone involved in my murder. So who actually caused your death? I have to be honest and tell you it was my daddy. My daddy. And I forgive him. It went on for a while. No one knew. Was he afraid you were going to tell someone? Oh, yes. Very afraid. It is not what it seems. Not what it seems. Mommy knew and did not tell. Mommy knew. Very painful. Are you with her now? Yes. Yes. Okay. Mommy is here. Thank you, Jean-Benet, for joining us today, and we wish you peace. You are so welcome. God bless you. God bless you all. Thank you, Jean-Benet. That was emotional. Wow. I cried.
After they got called out for that, they privated the video. But this is the internet. You might be thinking that I'm biased. So seriously, don't take my word for it. Go check out their page of accurate predictions. I've linked to it below, and trace any one of them back to the original unedited source. Listen to the entire thing. Count how many predictions they made. Count how many of them they got wrong. And for the ones that they got right, ask how vague was their prediction? How many different scenarios could it be talking about? And if it's specific, how probable of an event was it? For example, if they predict earthquakes in California in the coming year, that's not very specific, and it also has a 100% chance pretty much of being right. That's not called being psychic, it's called forecasting. If they really had powers, I would genuinely be impressed, and I would want to know. If they were, for example, able to publicly predict in advance that a 9.1 magnitude earthquake would hit 8.5 miles north of Memphis, Tennessee on July 18th, 2024, and it happens 100% as predicted, and they don't have a million other failed predictions to hedge the odds, then that really would be impressive. But I sincerely doubt that they can vindicate themselves like that, because you can't fix stupid. My guest today is a retired professor emeritus of psychology from the University of Oregon and a former Harvard University professor. A magician since the age of 7, he's coupled his knowledge of mentalism with his vast psychological research to become one of the world's most prominent skeptics of the paranormal. He's worked with the U.S. National Research Council and the Department of Defense, investigating psychics during the Cold War to see if psychic powers actually existed. He's a legend in the field of scientific skepticism, publishing his first critique of parapsychological research over 60 years ago. Since then, he's given countless Skeptics Toolbox workshops, teaching skeptics how to be more effective at combating harmful pseudoscience. He's the author of 5 books, including The Elusive Quarry, a scientific appraisal of psychical research. He's a co-founder of the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, and he's a champion at uncovering how the world actually works. Without any further ado, I give you Dr. Ray Hyman.
I'm Ray Hyman, and you are watching Holy Kool-Aid.
It's the mid-1970s, the middle of the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union are in an arms race to end all arms races. Desperate for an edge, both sides are experimenting with advanced warfare tactics, including psychic warfare, to see if there's anything to the phenomenon. Center stage is the Stanford Research Institute, where my guest today was called to investigate claims of the paranormal, particularly with one alleged psychic, Uri Geller. Now, take me back to that first phone call you received from the Department of Defense. What was going through your mind as they started making their proposition?
It was December 1972, and I was grading exams at the University of Oregon, where I was professor of psychology. And I got this phone call from Colonel Austin Kibler. He was the acting head of what's now called the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, a group that had been set up within the Defense Department by President John Kennedy to deal with futuristic things that would have military implications. It's sort of the Flash Gordon type stuff. Colonel Kibler called me to ask me to drop whatever I was doing if I could and go immediately to the Stanford Research Institute, which, by the way, wasn't connected with Stanford University. It was just independent, to look at a psychic, a claimed psychic. He immediately said, I know what you're thinking, Ray, because he knows I'm a skeptic, but this guy does all the things ordinary psychics are supposed to do, but he does things even more. He can apparently bend metal with his mind. And he gave me one example to tease me a little bit, I think, because he knew I was very reluctant. It wasn't clear whether he actually was there himself physically to watch this, but he said, Geller was in a room with a bunch of real scientists. You know, I'm a psychologist, so I guess he didn't think psychology is a real science. But anyways,
the physicists.
Physicists, right.
They know how to measure things with laser beams and scales,
exactly.
but they don't necessarily know how the mind works.
But anyways, he was in a room with a bunch of physicists from Stanford Research Institute. And there was a table in the middle of the room. Geller said, does anyone have a ring? He borrowed a ring. He said, don't let me touch it. Someone placed the ring in the middle of the table, on the top of the table, in the middle. Then he had everyone step back from the table. No one get to touch it, stand near it. He concentrated. The ring mysteriously stood on end. Well, not on end, but upright. Then it split and shaped itself into the letter S. Now, I am sure that wasn't a psychic thing, but it sounded to me like a good magic trick. I'm a magician. I thought, boy, I'd like to go down there and see it. So he got me to agree to go down there, and I did. And when I got there, just the team that was studying Geller would consist mainly of two physicists, Russell Targ and Hal Puharich. And they each had good credentials in their fields. And they had been studying Geller for about a week by the time I got there, doing experiments with him to see whether he could bend matter with his mind, whether he could do any ESP even. And they claimed they had been getting results. They actually had made a movie to show some of their experiments with him and how they succeeded.
Did they have a movie of the ring standing on end, or was that just anecdotal?
No, the ring standing on end is an interesting case because when I got there, that's what I was mostly interested in. But they showed me some of their data on the results they got with Geller on doing various things. And I was not quite interested in that as much as my mind was fixed on this ring thing. So I kept asking about the ring. Did you see it happen? Teach them. And some of the other people, I said, did you see it happen? Were you in the room when it happened? And eventually I figured out, because I was asking everyone, that none of the people there had seen him. No one had seen it.
Oh, then where did this story come from?
Came from Geller.
Geller made up the story in that...
Well, Geller told them a lot of stories, and because they were so intrigued by other things Geller did, they just took it for granted that... But when they told it to me...
The story you heard was that the physicists saw it, but they...
And it turned out other stories, other things they attributed to Geller, it was that Geller told them that, but no one ever witnessed it. I couldn't find anyone who witnessed it.
But one of the things that you maintain is that scientists are some of the most gullible people in the world. Scientists who have been perhaps tricked by Uri Geller, as you say, believe him. The vast majority of the people who watched this program when Uri Geller was here believe him, want to believe him. Are you saying that he's a fraud and that they can't believe someone like that?
He's a fraud, but you can't blame people for believing him. Geller is more the product of a wonderful public relations campaign than he is the product of being a clever illusionist. What the public gets is only one side of the story. For example, I spent the whole day with him, and I know some other scientists who spent quite a bit of time with him who weren't impressed with him. He's been caught cheating several occasions.
Cheating how? What kind of cheating?
Oh, they've caught him switching envelopes. His girlfriend, Hannah Strang, has confessed to the Israeli weekly, Halom Hazer, that she helped sitting in the audiences with him, coding him. She and her brother, Shippy Strang, was always with him, coding information to him for shows.
Coding information?
Sending signals to him about, one of the things he does on his show is he has people write on a blackboard. His back is to the blackboard, but he's facing the audience. They sit in the audience and code to him, signal him by hand signals, what was written on a blackboard.
The test that you did see Geller perform, was there anything
I didn't do it. I wasn't allowed to do any testing as such.
Okay.
I was part of a 3-man committee. One was George Lawrence. He was a psychologist, but he worked for the Advanced Research Project Agency, ARPA. Then there was a parapsychologist from the University of Virginia Medical School, Robert Vandercastle. And then it was me. The kind of thinking that ARPA had, the way their minds worked, was that if there was anything to this guy, if he's for real, it's going to take a parapsychologist like Vandercastle to see it. On the other hand, if this guy was doing hanky-panky and stuff like that, it would take an expert on deception like myself to see it. So that was their idea. And it turned out at the end of the day, we spent the whole day as a committee watching Geller do a lot of demonstrations. They wouldn't let us actually test them, but they let Geller demonstrate a lot of things for us. He demonstrated apparent mind reading. He demonstrated bending tweezers of George Lawrence. He apparently made hands of a clock move mysteriously to another time. Hands of a watch, actually, in this case. and he went in a room with Van de Castle, and they were isolated in the room, and he apparently figured out and got correctly, was able to draw an image that Van de Castle had put in an envelope and kept in his pocket. And when he was alone with Van de Castle in the room, Geller was able to apparently divine that.
But you knew how he was doing all of it?
He has a variety of ways. When he apparently turns away, sometimes he covers his eyes like this. When you're drawing, he's very good. He just needs a quick glance. But he uses arm movement and pencil reading. He's excellent at it.
What's that?
If he gives you a pad, in fact, the reason he wants you to draw it large because your arm movement's even bigger. When I was at Stanford Research Institute, I sat beside him. And when all these tests, whenever I was able to read someone's arm movement and know what they had put on the pad, he was able to do it. When I wasn't able to do it, he wasn't able to get it either.
You have a background in magic as a magician, correct?
Yeah, most magicians want to say that that is what is necessary. If you're studying a psychic, someone claiming some psychical powers, you need a magician on hand to avoid trickery. That makes a little bit of sense, except that I, as a magician, and also as a psychologist, know of many cases where even magicians would take it in. And in fact, when Geller became more famous after this, the time I was looking at him, no one knew about him at the moment. Nothing had gotten out to the rest of the country. But within a few days almost of my visit to the Stanford Research Institute and what I had to report on, what I saw, Geller became quite famous all over the country. There was a story in February of 1973, I think it was. That was soon after I had been with him, called The Magician, a think tank in Time magazine. And it was a negative story. In other words, they took my word for it, and they decided to play it up that this phony psychic was fooling these scientists at Stanford Research Institute. That was Geller's first publicity, and apparently made him a household figure, very famous all over the country. Got on TV shows.
So there's no such thing as bad press.
Exactly. And he took off from there, and for the next 5 years or so, he was really in the limelight. A lot of things he did, got all kinds involved, all kinds of celebrities, and he went on various television shows, and he took off from there. After I had seen him at the Stanford Research Institute, I wrote a report on what I had witnessed and my interpretation of it. Actually, a 13-page, single-space type letter. And usually these reports, you can't make them public when you're part of a government committee, you've been invited to investigate something. So I didn't mean to make it public, but Martin Gardner was a very good friend of mine. Everything I did, all my investigations I would share with him. And he was very helpful to me, and we would sometimes discuss it. So I sent a copy of my 13-page report as a letter to Martin Gardner. It so happened Martin Gardner at that time, just remember this, 1972, and in 1972, almost no one in their private homes had a photocopy machine. But Martin Gardner, who was a freelance writer and famous for his column in Scientific American, probably one of the first people had in his own home had a photocopy machine. I had sent this letter to Martin, and Professor Percy Diaconis, who was then a very young magician and a friend of Martin Gardner's, was visiting Martin Gardner when he got my letter. And Martin showed him my letter, and Percy, without Martin knowing it, photocopied my letter and sent it around to various people. And pretty soon, within a few days, that really got spread like wildfire. The physicists at Stanford Research got a copy of it, and the president of the Stanford Research Institute, his name was Charles Anderson, sent me a letter threatening to sue me, saying that, Stanford Research Institute depends on its reputation for its multi-million-dollar research every year that it gets from government agencies and stuff like that. This could affect us in terms of millions of dollars. Because one quote that Time magazine picked up on was I happened to say that I never saw such sloppy research in my whole life. Like that. And he saw that as a could affect the reputation of the Stanford Research Institute and could cost them millions of dollars. And he was threatening to sue me. He said, "This is really what you said," what Time magazine quoted from my letter. "This is what you really said. I want to know why you said it and what justification you had for it." So I did. I told him exactly what I had saw and what I had to say, why I said it. And, maybe it's fortunate he didn't try to sue me, but he did write back to me and say, "Well, thank you for your response. I know you're not going to be convinced by anything, but we're going to continue the research with Uri Geller, and when we show that he's for real, we'll let you in on it."
And that was shortly before he got debunked on Johnny Carson.
Well, he wasn't debunked on Johnny Carson. You got to be careful here.
Well,
he never was debunked as such. People tried to explain what he did, and some of the debunking was unfortunate. Right from the beginning, Mildred Christopher, a well-known magician, actually was invited to the Stanford Research Institute to see some of their work with Geller. They thought, he was a well-respected magician, he could sell things. So Christopher did a bad mistake, but it's typical of magicians, and all kinds of other people. He really did not know how Geller was doing it. Geller was fooling him, bending the stuff like that, some of the things he did. But he said that, and he goes wrong, of course, he said that Geller has a radio transmitter hidden in one of his teeth, and that's how he could pick up on doing his ESP type of stuff on people. Is he picking up somehow? I don't know how he got that. But he was completely wrong. But it's typical of many magicians. They never want to admit that they've been fooled. And so they make up stuff. In this case, he said he had the radio transmitter. And Geller made hay with had a good time with that, because Geller immediately was going around every time he goes to interview somebody, he opened his mouth saying, examine my teeth. Can you find any radio transmitters?
Which just because he's not using that method doesn't mean he's not using another.
That's right. Yeah.
I've kept noticing this trend in the skeptic movement where oftentimes people who are the most skeptical of crazy supernatural or paranormal claims have a background in magic or mentalism. I've gotten this from talking with James Randi, Banachek, Matt Dillahunty, and others. And it's almost like when you understand how easy it is to be fooled and how to fool others, that you just naturally become more skeptical. And I noticed that you also had a background in magic. How did you get into that? You had a background as a palm reader, correct? And as a magician?
Yes, I was a palm reader for 6 years. Professionally, making money at that. I tried to make money at it.
And then you shifted into psychology, just developing a fascination with...
No, I didn't shift into psychology. What happened was, before I knew science or anything else, I started when I was 16, and I retired from being a professional palm reader when I was 22, and that's when I became a major in psychology. When I began doing palm reading, I didn't believe in it. I was trying to do some extra things to make money. I did some mind reading type demonstrations like you see Banachek do here, because people pay me more money than doing a straight magic show, so I used to do mentalism. And I did readings, but my palm reading was also kind of a reading too, reading people. But I got to believe it because people responded. I told them all kinds of detailed things from reading the lines in the hand. Can't remember anyone saying that I was completely wrong in any way, but many times they would validate. I said, because palm reading, he picked that up apparently. I saw on the heart line of someone that at age 17, around that age, they had some problems with their head. And oftentimes people say, yeah, that's when I fell out of a tree and landed on my head, or stuff like that. And I did things like that, and oftentimes these hits would come out, so it affected me too. So I got to believe that something was there more than just my giving him generalities. And one day, when I was about 22 and just had begun college, a friend of mine, who's a famous mentalist at that time, Stanley Jacks, whenever he came to the Boston area, he'd like to come and see me do my palm reading if I was doing it. I was doing it at fairs and stuff like that. And usually I had a wooden frame with a curtain over it, kind of a makeshift booth. And my clients would come into the booth, and I would give them the reading. And you couldn't see them, but people standing near the booth could hear. So my friend Stanley Jacks, whenever he was in town and I happened to be doing readings, he would sit outside. He couldn't see, but he could hear what I was saying. And between clients, if there was a break, he and I would discuss some of my readings I just did. He was fascinated by this. And one day he said, Ray, wouldn't it be interesting if the next client came in and you told her everything wrong on the basis of palmistry? In other words,
the opposite. So if it's like a long lifeline, you tell her she'll have a short life.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's the idea. But majority of palmists today do not think that the lifeline tells the length of your life, tells the quality of your life, not the length. Because many people have been very badly hurt because a palm reader told them that they don't have many more years to live. And they spent most of the rest of their life really worrying about this. So in this case, the lady came in, and by the way, I was very reluctant to do this, but he had to convince me. But I respected Stanley, so I decided, okay, I'll try it. Because I felt that it was unethical, perhaps, to do that, and I got to consider my client, and it's not ethical to give him a false reading, basically. But I finally was convinced. The next lady came in, and I read everything wrong. She had a headline that said that she was very logical and stuff like that, and I told her, you're very bad bad with rational thinking. You don't think rationally. You like to solve things by intuition, stuff like that. And Hartline said that she liked to show her emotions. I said, you like to hide your emotions. So that's what I did. Every indicator I just read the wrong way. And to my surprise, she thought it was the greatest reading she ever had. And so I tried this on the next client, and also the same thing happened. And by then I was getting the notion that maybe what's going on here has nothing to do with the lines in the hand. And at that point, I decided to change my major. I was majoring in journalism to psychology. When I got into psychology, I learned a number of things quickly. First of all, I learned about scientific method and how you test things. I learned about how people can fool themselves to some extent. And I also learned how psychologists fool themselves too, because they had the Rorschach test, the inkblot test, and stuff like that. I could tell, and I actually there was literature on it. Everything I could find in the literature showed that the Rorschach test does not work. It has no validity. Yet psychologists were, at that time, completely riveted. That was the major test. And every graduate student in psychology had to spend a whole year on learning how to use the projective tests like the Rorschach and a few others. Yet, when I went to literature, I could not find a single study which supported the reality of it. But I found a lot of studies where they didn't get any results. So I realized very quickly that psychologists were just as much taken in by false tests as I had been with palmistry. And I saw no difference in it. I saw that psychologists were like ordinary customers of clients of palmists. They were taken in by this as well.
So if we're trying to communicate good science to people, how can we be more effective communicators? It's so tempting to simply tell people that they're idiots or they're wrong, but that usually doesn't accomplish a whole lot outside of inflating our own egos.
Of course, this whole skeptic movement is trying to be like that, but unfortunately, you can't just tell people that you got to be careful or that you've been taken in, something like that. You got to understand them, and you got to come at it nicely, because it backfires a lot, because you're implying I'm smarter than you are. I know something that you don't know.
There is so much pseudoscience, fake news, and misinformation out there floating around.
Right.
What advice would you give to people listening who have a hard time determining fact from fiction? What can they do to better spot the difference?
Well, it's not simple in one sense, but read a Skeptical Inquirer. That would help to get a lot of things like that. Whatever you're going to major in school and stuff like that, try and have courses that teach you something about statistical methods and about how you try to determine whether something is real or not, the various kinds of testing situations you would need to do it, double blind and things of this kind. And understand that when people are impressed by a reading they got, it turns out that this is the worst kind of evidence you could use for whether the reader who gave the reading is psychic or knows what he or she is talking about. It's called the fallacy of personal validation. There's been some good research on that. One of the things you got to realize is that the person himself who gets the reading and feels that this is real for them is the worst person to use to say whether it was actually true or not. Most readings succeed because the reader is telling the person things that are universally true of all people. The person getting the reading doesn't know that this is true of everyone else, but they know it's true of themselves, some of those things. And so they feel that this reading is uniquely true of themselves. And it's very hard for an individual to judge on the basis of how if they feel it applies to them. And you have to have someone else, some other way of doing it. It's got to be independent judges. It's a little complicated, but one way I have gone through this is I have used to give at these skeptic conferences, I started giving workshops on cold reading. I teach people, a whole room full of people, sometimes a few hundred people. I have them pair them up and I teach them how to scan each other, look at the hair, the face, the knees, the clothes, the shoes, and so anything like that. Make quick scan, I call it, and just relax. And if you look at the person's hair and you say, "What does it tell me about the person? Is he careless with his hair, or what? Or is he trying to make an impression?" If nothing stands out, forget about that. Look at the face now and see if there's anything, the shape of the face, or if there's any acne scars or anything else. If nothing stands out, forget about that. Look at the body.
Almost like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, exactly. But you're only looking for things that separate that person from others. And looking for things to stand out. You may find everything looks normal. You can't figure out anything special to say about the person except that the shoes don't match the rest of the clothes, okay? Or that the shoes are peculiar. Or that the hairstyle is unkempt a little bit, doesn't fit the particular situation they're in. And it turns out that this sounds abstract in some way, but when I tell people to do that, I pair them off. I tell them to do it to each other. Then I have them each give the other a reading based on just what they did in a quick scan. Most people never have done anything like this. They don't think they can. And then they give each other a reading. Right after the reading, I have everyone rank the accuracy of the reading they just got from their partner on a scale from 0 to 100. I started doing this in the early 1980s. I've done several hundreds of these workshops where I teach people to do this. The average accuracy rating of the readings they give each other, most of them doing this for the first time, is 86% consistently. And I think any real reader who thinks they're psychic, they can get 86% accuracy. They would feel that's good.
After talking with Dr. Hyman, I discovered that the CIA documents on Project Stargate, the name of the psychic investigation research he was a part of, have been declassified and can be read online. I'll link to them in the description. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, you can support my show by making a one-time donation on PayPal or make an ongoing recurring donation on patreon.com/holykoolaid, where there's different perks depending on how much you pledge. And if you're already a current patron, thank you so much. You make all of this possible. You guys rock. And as always, dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid.